Chapter 1026. The white bear could not avoid it either. Ning Shuamore's wooden spikes, except for the ones that were swatted away by the bear's paws, landed on the bear's body. The big white bear's skin was coarse and thick, so the wooden spikes couldn't even pierce through its oily skin in the slightest. Instead, it angered its temper. With a wave of its paw, rows of ice blades shot towards Ning Shuamore. A human and a beast were trapped here at the same time, and they began to fight. Since they could not move, they could only use their hidden weapons to attack each other. The white bear relied on its thick skin, and Ning Shuamore's hidden weapons only scratched its body. Ning Shuamore was also a quick-witted person. She quickly congealed a shield around her body. After she leveled up, congealing these shields was much easier. She could congeal them almost instantly. Almost all of the white bear's water attacks landed on her wooden shield. Ning Shuamore, on the other hand, wasn't able to deal with it as easily as it did. That thing's body was big and its strength was frightening. The water jets and ice blades it spat out were comparable to cannonballs, causing Ning Shuamore's arm to feel numb from the impact. After attacking and defending, Ning Shuamore's psychokinesis was depleted by more than half. An idea came to her, and she immediately absorbed spiritual energy from the snow to convert it. After a while, the psychokinesis in her body was replenished again. The white bear seemed to be able to absorb the spiritual energy here as well. After attacking Ning Shuamore for a while, it would stop for a while, and then attack her again as if it was injected with new energy. The veins on Ning Shuamore's forehead throbbed. It seemed that any creature could absorb the spiritual energy here. She could not go on like this. Although her psychokinesis could help her recover quickly, her physical strength was still limited. In terms of physical strength, she was obviously not the bear's opponent. Therefore, she had to hurry up and get out of the snow mire. Only when her body was free could she have more leeway. In other words, she had to absorb all the spiritual energy here as soon as possible. Of course, once the spiritual energy in this place was sucked dry, she would be able to escape, but at the same time, the big white bear would also be able to escape. Thus, after both of them escaped, she still had a tough battle to fight. However, as long as she could escape, she would have a chance of winning. If she continued to waste time here, she would definitely die. Having figured this out, Ning Shuamore fought with the big white bear while crazily absorbing spiritual power into her dantian. Endless spiritual energy surged wildly into her dantian, but it did not leave a trace. Ning Shuamore even suspected that her dantian was actually a bottomless pit that could not be filled no matter how much spiritual energy she had. The big white bear replenished another round of spiritual energy. It opened its mouth wide, and a water column several times larger than the previous one came pouring down on Ning Shuamore. Ning Shuamore's wooden shield shattered instantly. She was shocked and immediately reinforced it with 3 layers of wooden shields. The big white bear roared angrily, and the water column doubled in size. The first layer of wooden shield broke, and then the second layer. Ning Shuamore's arms were slightly sore, and her forehead was even sweating slightly. However, she did not dare to be careless. She focused all her attention on reinforcing the last layer of shield. At the same time, she was multitasking, increasing the speed at which she poured spiritual energy into her dantian. Slowly, she felt that her waist could move. She was overjoyed and desperately tried to absorb the spiritual energy. Then, her thighs could also move slightly. The spiritual energy in the Tianquan snow was decreasing. She would be able to come out soon. Catcher! Catcher! Ning Shuamore was shocked. She looked up and saw that the third layer of wooden shield had a few cracks under the big white bear's powerful water column attack. Chapter 1027. Ning Shuamore didn't have enough energy to build the 4th layer of the wooden shield. If it were a normal person, they would have panicked by now. However, she was a battle-hardened special agent who had experienced countless life-and-death situations. Ning Shuamore quickly calmed down. As she strengthened the 3rd layer of the wooden shield, she kept a close eye on the bear's movements, waiting for it to reveal its weakness. The cracks on the wooden shield were getting bigger and bigger. It was on the verge of collapsing. It could shatter at any moment, perhaps in the next second. In this extremely cold place, Ning Shuamore was so tired that she was sweating all over. The bear also seemed to be tired. Perhaps it was because victory was in sight and the prey was about to be in its hands, but it also relaxed a little. The water column in its mouth finally became smaller. Ning Xuemore was waiting for this moment. She instantly condensed the wooden shield into a long green sword. She went against the current and stabbed it into the bear's mouth like an arrow. The bear was shocked and instinctively closed its mouth. The long green sword hit the side of its mouth with a clang. Although it didn't pierce through its skin, it cut off a large chunk of the white fur around its mouth. The bear was instantly enraged. It used all its willpower to spit out a huge water column with a diameter of more than 10 meters. It charged straight at Ning Xuemore. If she was hit, she would be going to meet God. Ning Xuemore increased the speed at which she absorbed the spiritual power in her body. When the water column was in front of her, she suddenly jumped out and flew a few meters away. Phew, damn it, she was so tired. She finally got rid of the Tianquan snow's restraint. Bang! The big white bear's water column smashed into the place where she originally stood, stirring up countless snowflakes. It was as if an avalanche was crashing down on her head and face. Ning Xuemore's figure flashed again, avoiding the snow that filled the sky. When the big white bear saw Ning Xuemore suddenly jump out, it seemed to stare blankly for a moment. While it was in a daze, the avalanche it created rushed towards it. In an instant, it was buried under the avalanche, leaving only its white furry head exposed. The white bear was speechless. It roared angrily and struggled violently. Its violent movements caused the ground to tremble. This forced it out a little. No, it's coming out soon. She wanted to kill it while it was still trapped in the snow. Ning Xuemore slightly moved her limbs that were slightly stiff after being buried for a few days. Then, with a flash, she charged towards the big white bear like a bolt of white lightning. A cold glazed sword appeared in his hand, and he stabbed it towards the white bear's forehead. Bang! Sparks flew everywhere. The sword in Ning Xuemore's hand that could cut through gold and jade, and could even easily cut a lump of iron into two halves, was actually shattered inch by inch. However, there wasn't even a white mark left on the white bear's head. Ning Xuemore was shocked. Back then, she had observed the white bear skin that Yifeng had hunted. At that time, the white bear skin only had a hole in between its eyebrows. The other parts of the skin were intact. Therefore, she knew that the weak point of this kind of big white bear was between its eyebrows. That was why she had attacked it. She was now at Earth rank level 5, and the power of this sword was extremely strong. Ning Xuemore thought that she could kill this big monster in one hit, but she didn't expect that it would be ineffective. This killing move didn't succeed, but instead angered the white bear. It roared and slammed its claws towards Ning Xuemore. This claw contained a monstrous hurricane. If Ning Xuemore was hit by it, she would be turned into a picture. Chapter 1028. Luckily, Ning Xuemore's footwork was good. Her body was like a feather as she floated away from the bear's palm. She managed to avoid the bear's fatal attack. She flipped in the air and landed on the ground. When she looked at the bear again, her heart sank. The big white bear's mountain-like body had already pulled itself out of the snow. At this moment, it was glaring fiercely at Ning Xuemore with its basketball-sized red eyes. The white breath coming out of its nostrils caused the snow on the ground to dance wildly. It was so big. How was it a white bear? It was obviously a mountain god. Ning Xuemore stood in front of it like a ping-pong ball in front of a huge snowball. Her entire body was not even as big as one of its paws. Damn it, she was probably the size of a fly in front of it, right? Killing it was like an ant fighting an elephant. This is the Icefield Snow Bear King. It is the second overlord of the Icefield. The one that Yifeng killed could only be considered as a small fry. A voice suddenly sounded in the air not far away. The voice was as elegant as the wind and flowed in the air like an ice spring. Great God! Ning Xuemore turned around and saw Shenjioli floating in the air, his clothes fluttering in the wind. He was indeed invisible just now. He probably saw that she was in danger and showed himself. While Ning Xuemore was in a daze, the white bear's water pillar was already smashing towards Ning Xuemore's head. If it wasn't for her quick reflexes, the water column would have hit her directly. Ning Xuemore managed to dodge in time. The water column hit the ground and the snow on the ground melted quickly, forming a deep crack in the ice. This water column was so powerful. Even the most powerful high-pressure water gun couldn't do this. I forgot to tell you that it is an Earth rank level 8 beast. That year, 8 elders of the Flying Star sect who were Earth rank level 7 and above tried to kill it together. 5 of them were fatally injured and took 100 years to recover. However, their skills were all crippled. This bear is listed as one of the most dangerous beasts in the entire continent. Shinjoli continued to teach her about the bear. Ning Xuemo's lips twitch. 8 Earth rank level 7 elders couldn't even win against this thing. She, who had just reached Earth rank level 5, would be no match for it. She could only be tortured. Why was she so unlucky? Every time she met a super abnormal opponent. Damn God, would it kill to give her a small fry of the same level to have some fun? Most importantly, this beast's skin was too tough. She had tried so many ways to stab it, but she couldn't even cut off a few strands of its fur. There was no sense of accomplishment. She was at a disadvantage against this thing. She was unable to deal any damage to it. It seemed that she could only escape. Just as Ning Xuemo thought of running away, Shinjoli's voice sounded again. Don't even think about running away. It's a vengeful beast. Once it's angered, it will fight you to the death. No matter where you run, it will chase after you until it achieves its goal. What a crazy white bear. Ning Xuemo cursed in her heart, but she was still unconvinced. How did the 8 elders of the Flying Star sect escape? They were forced to the top of a cliff by it. The 8 of them jumped into the icy stream at the bottom of the cliff and barely escaped. There are no cliffs or ice streams here. Shinjoli's voice was still calm. While he was talking, Ning Xuemo had been chased by the white bear 8 times. She was bouncing around like a ping-pong ball. Chapter 1029. If it weren't for Ning Xuemo's strange footwork, which allowed her to escape danger by a hair's breadth, she would have long been bitten into the white bear's stomach and turned into bear dung. Don't talk about other things. Great God, it's so strong. My weak body won't be able to withstand one of its claws. Quickly come down and help me. Ning Xuemo panted as she circled around the white bear king while shouting and ridiculing him. She wished she could fly up and pull the great god down to be her human shield. Damn it, she was being chased by the bear and running around like a wolf, but the great god was floating in the clouds like a fairy. Not even a strand of his hair was messed up. He looked so relaxed that it was as if he was here for a vacation. It made her speechless. She hated it so much that her teeth itched. Shinjoli glanced at her and said calmly, I think you're also very strong. You might not lose to it. Ning Xuemo was speechless. You're the strong one. You're more like a pervert. You can only be strong when you're in a desperate situation. Xuemo, I'll be here cheering for you. Shinjoli waved his sleeves and a cloud table appeared under his feet. On the cloud table was a chessboard with black and white chess pieces crisscrossing each other. Ning Xuemo was speechless. She didn't even have the energy to complain anymore. If there was a pervert on this continent, it would definitely be Shinjoli. She couldn't rely on the great god now, so she could only rely on herself. However, if she was really in danger, the great god wouldn't just stand by and watch, right? Although Ning Xuemo was still being chased by the white bear, she was still in a difficult situation. However, with a great deity overseeing the situation, she felt a lot more at ease. She was already mentally strong, so she could naturally calm down now. She started to look for the white bear's weakness in the fight. Since the white bear was the overlord of this place, it must be very strong to be able to dominate in such a cruel environment. Moreover, it didn't show any weakness at all. While Ning Xuemo was running away, she had casually used her condensed concealed weapons to attack it countless times. She had pierced countless places, but she was still unable to injure it. Instead, it had angered it even more, causing it to fly into a rage as it circled around Ning Xuemo like a tornado. The dense water pillars and ice blades didn't stop like a storm. There were many times when Ning Xuemo was almost hit by the ice blades. If she was hit, she would become an ice hedgehog. She felt like she was a lone boat in the middle of a stormy sea. She was in danger of being swallowed by the waves at any moment. Rip. Her sleeve was hit by an ice blade and broke into two. That ice blade brushed past her arm. The edge of the ice blade even cut a layer of skin on her arm. Blood seeped out. Ning Shuamore's arm slightly trembled, and her body staggered. She narrowly avoided being hit by the big white bear's jet of water. Fortunately, she hastily retreated 2 steps to avoid it. The jet of water brushed past her hair, and her charming face was scraped by the hurricane created by the jet of water. Ning Shuamore desperately jumped back a few feet. She couldn't help but look up at the great god who was not far away. She was in danger here, but Shinjoli was sitting on the clouds like a deity overlooking the mortal world. He wasn't moved at all. He really didn't care about her anymore. If she had reacted a little slower, she would have gone to the king of hell for tea. Yet, he was still playing chess as if nothing had happened to him. Was chess that important to him? More important than her life? She had just played chess with him for a day. How could he treat her like this? Chapter 1030. The Almighty probably wanted her to know that she couldn't leave him. Once she left, it would be difficult for her to move forward. Did he want her to know that she couldn't be angry with him? Or else she would have to pay the price in blood. Although Ning Shuamore told herself not to think too much and not to care too much about it, there was still resentment in her heart that came from the bottom of her heart. A fight between masters was a matter of life and death, so she couldn't be distracted. Moreover, she was fighting against a bear that was much stronger than her in terms of ability and strength. She was immediately in danger. Carelessly, her calf was cut by the ice blade. Although it wasn't a serious injury, there was still blood flowing out. Although the ice blade shot by the big white bear wasn't poisonous, it was different from normal ice blades. When she was hit by it, it was as painful as being stung by a bee. The intense pain caused Ning Shuamore's drifting mind to return to reality. Now wasn't the time for her to be calculative. She had to fight for her life. Don't be distracted. Shinjoli's voice sounded in her ear. Ning Shuamore pursed her lips and ignored him. She didn't look at him and focused all her energy on the big white bear. Just like that, one person and one bear, one running and one chasing, fought for more than an hour. Within a radius of a few miles, all the snow had been flattened by the white bear. It had turned into a slippery, hard ice surface. However, there were countless ravines on the surface of the ice. Naturally, those were the result of the white bear's water jets. Shinjoli was still playing chess. He seemed to be leisurely, but in fact, he was constantly paying attention to all the movements below. If one looked carefully at the chessboard in front of him, one would be able to see that he was playing very carelessly. There were many flaws and it wasn't his usual style. Sometimes he held the black pieces, sometimes he held the white pieces. His fingertips were holding the pieces so tightly that they were faintly white. However, he was unwilling to put them down. There seemed to be a dark tide surging in his eyes. He had always used thunderous methods to train his disciples. A person's greatest potential would only be stimulated in the most dangerous situations. Therefore, he would often throw his disciples to a place where they would fight to survive. As long as they didn't meet with any real life-threatening danger, he wouldn't intervene. Therefore, the disciples he taught were all very independent, and their kung fu improved very quickly. Even when he saw his own disciple fighting for his life below, his heart was as calm as still water, as unmoving as a mountain. He wouldn't care about it at all. But this time, he started to feel uneasy. The blood stains that appeared on her body after she was injured almost stung his eyes. Chapter 1031. At first, Ning Shuamore was not very familiar with some of her moves. However, after fighting with the white bear for so long, she finally became more familiar with them. Her fire control skills had also improved greatly during the fight. Now, when she used fireballs to attack, she could shoot out 6 at once. Each fireball was the size of a small round table, and they surrounded the white bear from all directions. Although the white bear's water was the nemesis of fire, it could not withstand the number of fireballs that Ning Shuamore shot out. Moreover, the angle of attack was very strange, so the white bear could not guard against it. It slapped with its claws, poured water, whipped its tail, and jumped up to dodge. It used all kinds of tricks, and only then did it manage to dodge the fireballs. At this moment, Ning Shuamore's heart skipped a beat. When she used her wooden awl and wooden sword, the white bear did not even try to dodge. However, it seemed to be busy with the fireballs that she shot at it. It was actually afraid of fire. Ning Shuamore was very good at finding the opponent's weakness in battle. Once she found the weakness, she would kill it. Therefore, she quickly adjusted her fighting style. She used the fire element to attack, and the wood element to defend. This was a truly dangerous fight. Although there was a great disparity in strength, because of Ning Shuamore's numerous tricks and rich battle experience, she did not fall into a disadvantageous position. Her fireballs became more and more condensed, and the power of her fireballs became stronger. Finally, one of them hit the white bear's chest. Although it did not cause any substantial damage, it still burned a large part of its fur. The white bear was a male. It relied on its smooth, satin-like fur to attract the opposite sex. It was a very vain creature. Usually, it was very narcissistic about its white fur. When it had nothing to do, it would let the female bear it liked smooth its fur. The female bear would be very careful when smoothing its fur, because once a few strands were smoothed, it would fly into a rage and slap the female bear away. This showed how much it cared about its white fur. Now, its incomparably precious white fur was burned by this little woman who was not even a pellet in its eyes. It was bald. Its chest hair was bald. The big white bear was enraged. The hair on its body stood up like sharp needles, and it let out an earth-shattering roar. Its claws danced wildly, and a large iceberg quickly formed above its head. With a wave of its large claws, the large iceberg flew towards Ning Shuamore. At this time, it didn't want to catch her and eat her. Instead, it wanted to smash her into a meat patty, slap him into a pulp, in order to take revenge for this grudge. Boom! The iceberg slammed into the ground, causing the ice shards on the ground to dance wildly. That little human who dared to burn its fur must have been slapped to death, right? It was impossible for her to dodge such a huge iceberg. This was his ultimate move. Back then, he had used this move to kill a snow eagle flood dragon that was opposing their bear clan. The entire bear clan took delight in talking about this. Even such a powerful snow eagle flood dragon was unable to dodge its iceberg, so it was even more impossible for that little person to dodge. The big white bear was still confident. Therefore, after the ice shards fell from the sky, it scanned the surroundings with its blood-red eyes. Sure enough, it did not find any trace of the little person. She must have been smashed to death. The big white bear proudly looked up to the sky and roared. It raised its claws and wanted to push the iceberg aside, wanting to pick up some meat paste for its meal. Whoosh! Suddenly, there was the sound of a gust of wind behind its head. Before it could react, a fireball hit the back of its head. She had already grasped the big white bear's movements and attack patterns, so it wasn't as difficult as before to deal with it. For the first time, the big white bear was so tired from fighting that it was covered in sweat. The sweat almost soaked its fur, as if it had been washed with water. Ning Shuamore naturally didn't have it easy either. She was also covered in sweat, and she was so tired that she wanted to die. She couldn't wait to lie down on the snow and roll around a few times to rest. But she couldn't. She didn't have the right to rest before she defeated this fellow. Although she had burned off a few parts of the big white bear's fur, making it look like a spotted pig with mangy skin disease, she hadn't really caused any fatal damage to it. Chapter 1033. Ning Shuamore's hidden weapons had almost tested every part of its body. There was no weak point. She still could not find its weak point. During the fierce battle, she was constantly sizing it up, trying to analyze where its weak point was. Its weak point should be on its hind feet. Shinjioli suddenly said from afar. Ning Shuamore, indeed, the big white bear had been fighting with her while standing upright, and her hidden weapons did not even miss its anus. These were not its weak points. Then if it really has a weak point, then it's most likely the two soles of its back feet that were constantly stepping on the ice. Ning Shuamore swept her hand across its thick pillar-like hind feet, the corners of her lips twitching. How could she make this bear lift its hind feet and let her stab it with her sword? She also couldn't drill under its feet. One person and one bear fought for a while. Ning Shuamore carefully observed for a moment, and found that the big white bear was unusually cautious of its hind feet. It would not lift them easily, especially its left foot, which was the most important part of its protection. If the wooden thorns that Ning Shuamore shot at it hit other parts of its body, it would ignore them, but when it was near its left foot, it would use its claws to brush it away. Its weak point should be on its left foot. Ning Shuamore's eyes flickered slightly, then she suddenly changed her attack method. She no longer used the fire attack that could burn off the big white bear's fur, but instead used the useless wooden thorns to attack. The wooden thorns that she shot out were nearly a foot long, incomparably sharp, but the accuracy was not very good. Most of them did not hit the big white bear's body, but directly hit the ice behind the big white bear. Is this little thing out of strength? It's so inaccurate, even if it stood there and let her shoot, she could only hit it a few times. Ha ha ha, this little thing's body is small, its strength is naturally small, it should be exhausted soon. The big white bear became complacent again. It roused its spirit and attacked Ning Shuamore even more fiercely. Ning Shuamore was probably really exhausted. In the fierce battle, her body suddenly staggered and fell forward. The ice beneath her was slippery, and she could not stop her momentum. Her entire body slid onto the left hind leg of the big white bear. The big white bear was stunned. Naturally, it did not want to let go of this rare opportunity to flatten this little person. He immediately lifted his left foot and stomped down on Ning Shuamore's body. Its hind legs were as thick as pillars, and one of its feet was as big as a round table. If Ning Shuamore was stepped on by it, she would be trampled into a pile of meat. In the clouds, Shinjoli's expression changed. He stood up abruptly and was about to make a move to save them when his eyes suddenly widened. Whitey, who had already lifted its left leg, suddenly remembered something. Before its foot could touch Ning Shuamore, it suddenly landed on the ground. Its action was a little too hasty, and the huge inertia caused its body to shake violently, and it took another 2 or 3 steps back. Pu. Ow! A loud sound like a tire had burst sounded. The big white bear's left foot had coincidentally stepped on a sharp wooden thorn. It let out a long and miserable howl, and its huge body fell backwards, and Ning Shuamore had already rolled forward cleverly to avoid the falling body, and rolled to the other side that she had already calculated beforehand. The sound of the big white bear falling to the ground was earth-shattering, and the surrounding snow shook a few times as if there was an earthquake. Countless snowflakes were stirred up, and fell onto the big white bear on the ground. Chapter 1034. The big white bear could no longer get up. It curled up and trembled on the ground. There was a huge wooden spike embedded in its paw, and blood flowed down the side of the spike like a small stream. Its weak spot was indeed under its left paw. In just a short moment, the big white bear was already on the verge of death. It stared unwillingly at Ning Shuamore, who was slowly approaching it. It couldn't believe that it would lose to such a small person. Ning Shuamore approached it with a tense expression. Then, she raised her hand and pulled out the wooden spike from its paw. Fresh blood spurted out like a fountain. The big white bear let out a long howl and finally breathed its last. Ning Shuamore's move seemed like a dangerous move, but in reality, it was all part of her meticulous calculations. Every single wooden spike she shot out that seemed to have missed its target had been precisely calculated by her. There was a formation in place. The big white bear moved as if it was flying. When its battle prowess was high, it didn't use much strength when it landed. It could even step on snow without leaving a trace. Under normal circumstances, even if the big white bear stepped on one of the wooden spikes Ning Shuamore placed there, it would just brush past it and wouldn't be injured. However, when Ning Shuamore fell on its hind paw, it gave the big white bear a fright. It mistakenly thought that Ning Shuamore was going to attack its weak spot, so it subconsciously stepped on it. When it remembered that its weak spot was also there, it would subconsciously retract its paw. Under such circumstances, it would definitely stumble back. It didn't have time to use the light body technique, so it fell into the trap she had set up beforehand. She had used all of these methods one after another, and everything was within her calculations. And so, she won. She won against this big fellow that was 3 stages higher than her. Even 7 or 8 experts couldn't do anything to it. There's an inner core crystal on its body. Dig it out and use it. Shinjoli's voice rang out from behind Ning Xuemore. He even praised her. Well done. Ning Xuemore didn't turn around. She had read many books about exotic beasts, so she naturally knew where the inner core of this kind of bear was located. After the bear's Achilles heel was pierced, the originally pliable and tough skin that could not be pierced by any sword became much easier to cut. Ning Xuemore quickly found a large section of dark blue crystal on its body. This was the first time she had seen such a pure crystal pillar. It was as if there were water ripples flowing on top of it. It was exceptionally beautiful. Retrieving the crystal pillar was not easy, and she was extremely tired. So after retrieving it, she hugged the crystal pillar and sat on the ground, not wanting to move at all. Absorb the psyche power on this crystal pillar with the art of rejuvenation. Shinjoli's voice sounded again. Ning Xuemore simply lay down on the snow, closed her eyes and said nothing. She was so tired that she didn't even have the strength to speak. What's wrong? Are you angry? Shinjoli squatted down beside her. Ning Xuemore still didn't open her mouth, and she didn't have any intention of opening her eyes. This bear is a spiritual creature born from heaven and earth. It has already cultivated for thousands of years. It is the only beast with the strongest water spiritual root in the world. The Psyche water crystal pillar in its body is different from others. It has a directional attribute. In a fight, it will take the initiative to face the strongest attacker. If it is killed, this crystal pillar can only be used by the strongest opponent. If I make a move, you will have no fate with this high-quality water spiritual root. So unless it was absolutely necessary, he couldn't make a move. Otherwise, Ning Xuemore wouldn't be able to obtain this water psyche crystal. Chapter 1035. After you get this item, the sooner you absorb it, the purer it will be and the more effective it will be. After 10 hours, half of the effect will disappear. Water is wood, it will be very beneficial for your wood psychokinesis. Shinjoli explained to her and pulled her up. Be good, absorb it while it is still fresh. It turned out that he had been watching from the side without making a move for her own good. He wanted her to get this crystal. Half of the gloominess in Ning Xuemore's heart dissipated. However, understanding was one thing, and feeling was another. Thinking about how the Almighty was playing chess leisurely by the side when she was fighting for her life, she felt angry. He seemed to be more anxious about the progress of her practice than she was, as if he wanted to make her a peerless master. He was obviously pursuing her, but he was evasive about the marriage. It was as if he was avoiding something. What was he planning to do? Ning Xuemore boasted that she understood human nature the best and could read people's minds the best. But she really could not see through him. She was angry, but she would not make things difficult for herself. She did not want to waste a single bit of the psychokinesis in the crystal pillar. She was about to absorb the water psychokinesis in the crystal pillar according to the method he told her. Suddenly, Kirin's voice sounded in her mind. Master, Master, where are you? Its voice sounded a little out of breath, as if it was breathing unsteadily. Ning Xuemore's heart sank a little. Could it be that they were in danger? Little Apple, what happened? Why are you panting? Master, we have encountered a monster. It was covered in white scales and its body was like a dragon, but it had 2 curved and sharp horns. It had a big mouth and fangs that were half a foot long. There was also an ice ball on its tail. What kind of monster is this? Ning Xuemore drew a sketch of the monster in her mind, then she realized that it was a monster that she had never heard of before. But this was not what she cared about. She only cared about the safety of those people. How is it? Is that monster powerful? You guys are not its match. It's so powerful. We are no match for it. Its body is twice as big as mine, and its strength is also greater. Even if Yi Feng and I work together, we are still no match for it. Ning Xuemore stood up. Tell me where you are. I'll go rescue you. No. There's no need. Although I can't beat it, it can't run as fast as me. If it really doesn't work, I can fly. Now we should get rid of it. Ning Shuamore was relieved to hear that they were out of danger. Did you meet that monster by chance? How many are there? Oh my God, one of them almost broke his leg from running. If a few of them come, I'm afraid I'll die. So there was only one. Ning Shuamore was even more relieved. Where did that monster come from? How did you provoke it? Ning Shuamore wanted to understand the habits of this monster. But her question immediately ignited Kareen's negative emotions. It seemed that it had been holding back for a long time, and now it immediately complained to Ning Shuamore. It's all that idiot Jiyu Xian's fault. He found a large egg at the bottom of an ice slope. Yi Feng said that the egg looked ominous and couldn't be eaten. But Jiyu Xian laughed at Yi Feng because he didn't even dare to eat an egg. He broke the egg on the spot, saying that the egg was nutritious and could replenish one's strength if eaten raw. In the end, when the egg was broken, it attracted the mother of the egg. It was that big monster. It flew into a rage and chased after us to bite us. If I hadn't run fast enough, we would have been finished this time. Chapter 1036. In such a snowfield, a young master like Jiyu Xian, who had not experienced any great storms, was just a burden. He could not accomplish anything, but he was good at spoiling things. It made people speechless. Kareen seemed to still be in the process of escaping, so after it said a few more words, it hurriedly ended the call with Ning Shuamore. In fact, Kareen was indeed still running for its life. It was like a bolt of blue lightning, flying across the vast white snowfield. The sled behind them was almost flying. It had barely touched the ground, and the wind mixed with the snow made their cheeks hurt. A huge monster that looked like a dinosaur and was covered in white scales was chasing after them. The monster's speed was so fast that it was almost on par with the little Cheline. When Jiyu Xian turned around, he saw the monster staring at him with its lantern-sized eyes. It was glowing with an ominous glint. Its huge mouth opened and roared from time to time. Jiyu Xian could almost see its huge sharp teeth with a few strands of flesh hanging from them. He was so scared that his legs were trembling. His face was pale, and his hands were trembling so much that he almost lost his grip on the sled. The monster opened its mouth, and a strong, fishy wind blew toward them. Ah! Yang Ziyuan cried out in alarm. She lost her grip on the sled, and her hands loosened. Her whole body flew out like a kite with a broken string. Behind her, the white monster was waiting with its huge mouth open. Jiyu Xian shouted, "Ziyuan!" But he only held on tightly to the sled and turned his head away. He could not bear to see Yang Ziyuan being torn apart. Yi Feng also flew out the moment Yang Ziyuan was thrown out. He raised his speed to the maximum and finally caught Yang Ziyuan before she fell into the monster's mouth. But he was too fast, and he could not stop in time. He could only watch as he flew into the monster's mouth. When the monster saw that there was one more person, it was naturally very happy. It quickly opened its mouth wider, waiting for a big meal to be delivered. Yang Ziyuan could almost see the monster's house-sized mouth. A huge blood-red tongue with flesh spikes curled up, and stinky saliva dripped down the monster's mouth drop by drop. She was so scared that her face turned pale and her heart felt like it was going to jump out of her chest. Her vision suddenly turned black as a large hand covered her eyes. Yi Feng's slightly cold voice sounded in her ears, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." These simple words gave Yang Ziyuan great comfort. It was as if a warm current was washing over her heart, making her have an inexplicable urge to cry. She was tightly held in Yi Feng's arms, but his strength was so gentle that it was as if he was protecting a precious and fragile porcelain. She did not feel any pain at all. Yang Ziyuan was pressed against his chest. Her eyes were covered by his hand. Hearing his fast and powerful heartbeat, she suddenly felt at ease. It was as if even if there was a mountain of knives and a sea of fire in front of them, as long as she was with him, they could go through it together. Yi Feng calmly looked at the enlarged mouth in front of him. At the moment when he was about to fly in, he kicked the monster's sharp teeth. The strength of his kick was so great that it broke the monster's teeth. Using this reaction force, his body shot up, and after a few quick jumps on the snowy ground, he flew towards the sled. All of this happened in a flash. The monster thought that a big meal was about to be in its mouth, but it did not expect that the fat meat in its mouth would fly away and one of its front teeth would be broken. It was furious and roared again and again. Chapter 1037. The roar was so loud that Jiyu Xian almost fainted. His face was drained of color as he gripped the sled tightly. He urged Kirin, who had deliberately slowed down to wait for Yifeng, to speed up. If it wasn't for the fact that Jiyu Xian's blood was the antidote to the curse, Kirin would have thrown Jiyu Xian out to feed the monster. How could there be such a scum in this world? Yifeng finally rushed back with Yang Ziyuan in his arms. Because of this delay, the white monster was very close to them. Kirin waited for Yifeng to regain his footing before picking up speed. Finally, they managed to put some distance between them and the monster. The wind on the icy plains was strong to begin with, and with Kirin's lightning-fast speed, the wind was so strong that it could almost flip a person over. The real wind was like a knife cutting through the air. At this time, it was snowing. The usually soft and light snowflakes were like small cannonballs under the relatively high speed, smashing down on Yifeng and the others. Yifeng gripped the sled tightly with one hand and raised his sleeve to protect Yang Ziyuan. At the same time, he used Sharkman's power of origin to keep her warm. Yang Ziyuan had an indescribable feeling in her heart. She wanted to push him away, but she also wanted to hug him tightly. This feeling was sweet and sour at the same time. It made her slightly absent-minded. The person in front of her who was hugging her was very warm. At the same time, he was also protecting her tightly, as if he was afraid that she would be hurt. On the other hand, Jiyu Xian was very unlucky. The wind blew so hard that he couldn't open his eyes. His fingers were frozen, and his hair was blown wildly by the wind. He had lost his gentle and elegant image of a noble young master. Now, he was clutching the sled tightly like a madman. He screamed in horror, "Slow down, slow down. I'm going to be thrown off. Ziyuan, tell Kirin to slow down, slow down." Kirin was furious. It said fiercely, "Shut up. If you dare to say another word, I'll chop you up and feed you to the dogs." Jiyu Xian immediately kept quiet out of fear, not daring to say another word. He could only continue to hold onto the sled tightly. Like a frightened quail, he curled himself up into a ball and looked at the monster that was getting closer and closer to him with fear and trepidation. He no longer cared that Yifeng was holding Yang Ziyuan. "Catcher, catcher." The sled beneath him suddenly made a strange noise. Yifeng's expression changed slightly as he frowned. This was bad. The sled was about to fall apart. Coincidentally, one of the logs under Jiyu Xian broke. His body tilted and he was almost thrown off. In his panic, he couldn't help but shout, the sled is breaking." Naturally, Yang Ziyuan also knew that the sleigh was about to break. Her face turned pale, and she couldn't help but tighten her grip on Yifeng's hand. Yifeng hugged her tightly with one arm and comforted her softly, "Don't be afraid." Yifeng's voice seemed to have a strange soothing effect. It made her panicked mind slowly calm down. The little Cheline tried to slow down in order to slow down the speed of the snowsleigh's destruction, but the white beast was relentless in its pursuit. As soon as it slowed down, the white beast fiercely opened its mouth and fiercely closed it again. The sound of its white teeth biting down was extremely loud. Jiyu Xian was so scared that his soul almost flew away. He kept urging, "Faster, faster. Ah, no, you can't go too fast. It'll fall apart. What should we do? Yifeng, don't you have any ideas? It's a pity that I've lost all my power. Otherwise, I would definitely be able to stop it." The wind was too strong, and his voice was broken in the air. Chapter 1038. Yang Ziyuan was barely able to hear what he said. However, she was also concerned about him. Hearing the change in pitch of his voice, she could not help but ask Yifeng, "Yifeng, what did he say?" Yifeng looked back at the monster that was about to catch up to them. Then, he looked at Yang Ziyuan, who was in his arms. Steeling himself, he pulled her hand and placed it on the sled. "You can do it. Hold on tight. Yang Ziyuan subconsciously tightened her grip on the wooden handle. Suddenly, she felt a chill run down her back. Yifeng's body was sent flying backward. His cold voice could still be heard clearly in the wind. "Kirine, you take the two of them and leave first. I will bring up the rear. Bring up your sister's bloodline." He was simply no match for the monster. Bringing up the rear would only make him a snack for the monster. Was he planning to use his own flesh and blood to help the two of them? That stupid fish. Kirine opened its mouth and turned around to grab Yifeng's robes. Then, it tossed him onto its back. The wind was too strong and Kirine could only shout. Master said, "We must go through thick and thin together. If we are going to leave, we will leave together." After that, it used the same method to toss Yang Ziyuan onto its back. Just as it was about to reluctantly hold Jiyu Xian in its mouth, Jiyu Xian saw the huge mouth right before his eyes. Fear welled up in his heart and he could not stop himself from taking a step back. He avoided Kirine's mouth. Kirine. Holy shit. At the same time, the fragile sled was no longer able to withstand Kirine's lightning-fast speed. With a crash, it broke into pieces. Jiyu Xian rolled and was thrown out. The inertia was too great and he rolled like an unstoppable ball. When he finally managed to stop rolling and opened his eyes, he was so frightened that he nearly fell to the ground. Behind him, the white monster was less than 10 steps away from him. Seeing that he was alone, the white monster's eyes filled with excitement and ferocity. It opened its mouth and charged toward him. "Ah! Help! I was left behind. Kirine, I was left behind. Ziyuan." Jiyu Xian let out a shrill cry. His voice had completely changed. It was almost inhuman. Kirine cursed under his breath and had no choice but to turn around and run back. Jiyu Xian was about the same distance away from the two beasts. When Kirine arrived, the white behemoth had also arrived. Its big mouth was facing Jiyu Xian, and its saliva was almost dripping onto his head. Jiyu Xian seemed to have fainted from the shock and was paralyzed on the spot. The white behemoth was stunned when it saw the little Chiline that had run away come back like a bolt of lightning. While it was in a daze, the little Chiline had already gathered all its strength. Its big head fiercely slammed into the relatively soft part of the behemoth's body, causing the behemoth that was twice its size to stumble back a few steps. Kirine's head was also dizzy from the impact. It shook its big head and took the opportunity to pick up the unconscious Jiyu Xian with its mouth and threw him on its back. At the same time, it muttered, "Why is there a foul smell?" Then, it sped up and ran a few steps. A pair of fleshy wings spread out on its body, and it flew up like a small glider. It was actually very sad. If it was not so urgent, Kirine would not let anyone else ride on its back except for its master and the Divine Lord. Now that the situation was urgent, it had no choice but to carry them on its back and fly for a while. The white behemoth obviously could not fly, but it was unwilling to give up and chased after them for a long distance. When it saw that it could not catch up, it resentfully stopped. Chapter 1039. The monster roared a few times at the sky where Kirine had disappeared. Its long and sorrowful cries resounded through the sky. Kirine carried Yifeng and the others into the air. Jiyu Xian finally woke up. When he woke up and saw himself flying in the air, he was so scared that he trembled. When he was unconscious, Yifeng had been holding him tightly. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to sit on Kirine's back. When Yifeng saw that he had woken up, he also let out a sigh of relief and said lightly, "Hold on tight." In order for them to have something to hold on to, the little Chiline deliberately changed the Chiline armor on its back into a few handles. Yifeng moved aside and let Jiyu Xian hold on to one of the handles. Jiyu Xian also knew that this was a moment of life and death, so he quickly held on tightly. He had been frightened too much today and his mind was on the verge of collapse. When Jiyu Xian's frightened soul returned to its original position, he suddenly felt that a certain part of his lower body was a little cold and painful. He was shocked. Could it be that the monster ate his family jewels? He quickly touched his lower body and made sure that it was still there. Only then did he let out a long sigh of relief. Yifeng coldly watched him touch himself. He buried Yang Ziyuan's face in his arms, not letting her see this unsightly scene. Jiyu Xian's touch was completely subconscious. When he realized how embarrassing it was to do it, he had already finished touching himself. Even if Jiyu Xian's skin was as thick as a city wall, his handsome face couldn't help but turn red at this moment. He was embarrassed in front of his love rival. Not only did he touch himself, he was also so scared that he wet his pants. If those two people knew about this, then he, Jiyu Xian, would really find a hole to hide in. However, Kirin's back was wide enough and he was sitting behind Yifeng and the others. They shouldn't be able to smell it, right? Jiyu Xian could only clamp his legs together and pretend that nothing had happened. He adjusted his wolf fur robe to make himself look more natural. He wanted to change the topic to end this awkward situation. He cleared his throat and said, "Ziyuan, you." Before he could finish his sentence, Kirin interrupted, "Jiyu Xian, why is your butt so wet? Damn it, did you pee your pants just now?" Jiyu Xian was speechless. His face turned even redder as he tried to defend himself. "No. Of course not. It's snow water. Just now, there must have been snow stuck to my body, so. Fuck. Who are you trying to fool? Snow water smelled like urine? Don't try to fool me." Kirin bluntly exposed him. Jiyu Xian. He couldn't find the words to refute her. On the other side, Kirin bluntly scolded him, "A grown man like you actually peed your pants? Don't you feel ashamed? Don't you dare pee on me again. If you dare to pee on me, I will immediately throw you down and trample you to death." Jiyu Xian. His face had already turned the color of pig liver. Yang Ziyuan couldn't help but turn around and look at Jiyu Xian with a complicated expression. "Xian," Kirin was still complaining, but Jiyu Xian couldn't hear her at all. His mind was filled with the words embarrassing. Not only did his beloved find out about this embarrassing incident, but his love rival also saw it as a joke. He originally wanted to call Yang Ziyuan over so that she wouldn't be with Yifeng. Now that Kirin had exposed the fact that he had peed his pants, he wanted to find a hole to hide in. He was too ashamed to call Yang Ziyuan over. Chapter 1040. Yifeng did not look back at all. It had nothing to do with him whether that person peed in his pants or not. The wind was biting cold. No matter who it was, opening their mouth would result in a stomach full of wind. The little Chileen was flying too fast, so Yang Ziyuan didn't dare to move carelessly on its back. She wanted to ask about Jiyu Xian's situation, but after being hit by the wind several times, she finally gave up. Kirin did not fly for a long time in the air. Yang Ziyuan and Jiyu Xian's psychokinesis was either weak or non-existent, so they could not withstand the strong wind in the air. The two of them could not withstand a long flight, so Kirin flew for less than half an hour before Jiyu Xian painfully shouted for it to stop. Kirin laughed at him for a while, then slowly descended when it saw that the white monster was no longer there. During this time, Yang Ziyuan had been very quiet, staying beside Yifeng. No one knew what she was thinking. Yifeng had been protecting her, slowing down the wind for her. He lowered his eyes and looked at Yang Ziyuan, who was sitting quietly beside him with her head lowered. Suddenly, he felt a little warm in his heart. She was now willing to sit beside him and let him shelter her from the wind and rain. This was like a dream. The pain in his heart for the past few days was like the ice and snow of early spring, slowly melting away. His empty and frozen heart was filled at this moment. It was warmed and gradually became alive. Again and again, it beat vigorously. Although the conditions were bad, and they were still running for their lives, Yifeng felt satisfied. He hoped that time would stop at this moment, and she would be by his side safely, relying on him wholeheartedly. Under his wings, she would be happy and worry-free for the rest of her life. If this is a dream, please let me wake up later. The little Chileen slowly landed in an open space. It shook the scales on its body and felt that it was scum after flying with Jiyu Xian on this journey. If it weren't for the fact that they couldn't leave it, it would have dived into the sea to wash itself. It was a Kirin that loved cleanliness. After Yifeng landed safely with Yang Ziyuan in his arms, he subconsciously hugged her to protect her. Jiyu Xian rolled and crawled down from the little Chileen's back. He staggered and stood firm on the ground. After seeing Yi Feng's action towards Yang Ziyuan, the fire in his heart flared up. In a flash, he felt as if his hat had been cuckolded by a lot. He resisted the urge to get angry and squeezed out a gentle and handsome smile. Ziyuan, come here. Why do you always stay with other men? Yang Ziyuan was stunned and hesitated for a moment. She looked at him and then looked at Yi Feng. Her clear eyes flashed with some confusion, and her feet moved slightly towards him. Jiyu Xian's heart skipped a beat. He had a feeling that Yang Ziyuan was going to be out of his control again. He immediately cast a spell secretly and strengthened the control of the double life spell. He looked at Yang Ziyuan with tenderness that almost turned into tears. Ziyuan, come here. Let me see if you're hurt. Come to my side. Yang Ziyuan's eyes flashed with pain and confusion. In the end, she finally fell in love with Jiyu Xian. She broke free from Yi Feng's hand and walked towards Jiyu Xian. She said with concern, Xian, how are you? But she couldn't help but look at Yi Feng. Jiyu Xian took the opportunity to hold Yang Ziyuan's hand and looked at her affectionately. Ziyuan, as long as you're okay, I'm alive for you. At the same time, he strengthened the power of the double life spell again. Chapter 1041. Yang Ziyuan's gaze finally lingered on him and no longer looked at anyone else. Yi Feng lowered his eyes and looked at his hand. Her body heat still lingered on it, but she had already turned her back to him and walked step by step towards another man. He could only stand there stiffly. There was no reason for him to persuade her to stay. She didn't look back either. She walked to Jiyu Xian's side and was pulled into his arms. She snuggled up to him and asked about his well-being. From the beginning to the end, she didn't turn back to look at Yi Feng. Yi Feng's numb heart seemed to ache again. He closed his eyes slightly and calmed the undercurrent in his heart. He woke up from his dream so soon. Perhaps their fate had to end here. After all, now was not the time to sort out his chaotic emotions. Yi Feng calmed down in a moment. He temporarily put his heartache aside and used the method Ning Xuemo taught him to find the ice flame flower. He began to slowly search for traces to determine which direction they should go. Previously, they were chased like pigs and wolves, and now they didn't even know where they were. Yi Feng was naturally the soul of this team. Only after he determined which direction to go, could Kirin escort them. This was a forest of ice towers. Small icebergs of various sizes rose from the ground and shone faintly under the starlight. The light blue and dark blue icebergs were strangely shaped. The starlight reflected on them, and they were exceptionally beautiful. Yi Feng was in a trance for a moment. He had once brought Yi Yu to a crystal island. There were crystal towers on the island, and they were similar to the ice towers here. At that time, Yi Yu was so happy when she saw this beautiful scene that she laughed and jumped beside him. She even hugged his neck and spun around a few times. She even sang a song and danced for him. At that time, she hugged his arm and said that she liked it there. She wanted to build a palace there and make it her home, because that island was quite far from where sharkmen lived. It took a day's journey to and fro, and Yi Feng had to deal with the affairs of the clan. It was impossible for him to build his home there. Therefore, Yi Feng didn't take her words seriously and just laughed it off. After that, he didn't go there for a long time. When he went there again, he found the man that Yi Yu secretly hid on that island. After Yi Yu's death, Yi Feng imprisoned himself on that small island to help her recover her soul. He spent a few hundred years on that small island. He built the Sharkmen Palace on that island according to the layout she liked when she was alive, fulfilling her wish. Unfortunately, she never saw it again. Now, looking at the place that was almost similar to the scenery of the small island, and then looking at the two people in front of him who were talking in a low voice, Yi Feng felt as if his heart was being pricked by needles. He suddenly strode forward and silently began to chisel the ice to build the house. After this round of running, Jiyu Xian's legs were weak and his bones felt like they were about to fall apart. He glanced at the busy Yi Feng and didn't say anything. After thinking for a while, he pulled Yang Ziyuan's hand and said, Ziyuan, let's check the surroundings. If there's no danger, we'll rest here. Yang Ziyuan also felt like her body was about to fall apart. She actually wanted to rest more. She couldn't help but look at Yi Feng. Yi Feng was only focused on chiseling the ice and didn't raise his head to look at them. For some reason, Yang Ziyuan was a little afraid of being alone with Ji Yuxian. However, the twin life curse made her unable to go against Ji Yuxian's wishes. Chapter 1042. Therefore, she paused for a moment and said, "Let's not run around. There might be monsters or something like that. Let's not separate for the time being." Ji Yuxian's expression did not look too good. When Yang Ziyuan said this, she could not help but look at Yi Feng a few times. It was obvious that she had unknowingly taken Yi Feng as her pillar of support. She was his future wife. He should be her sky and she should rely on him. But now, she could not help but look at Yi Feng. This was with the effect of the twin life curse on her. Without the twin life curse, she would not even be bothered to look at him at this time. She clearly loved him so much. She was obviously so obsessed with him, but he did not know when her attention had been diverted. Her thoughts were all on her secret guard. After he escaped with Rongyang that day, he fled back to Daliang City in a panic. He thought that Yang Ziyuan had died and was very sad. He was depressed at home for 2 days. Lord Yang heard the news that he had returned to the city from somewhere and personally came to ask about his daughter's whereabouts. Ji Yuxian naturally could not say that he had given up on Yang Ziyuan at the most critical moment, so he vaguely glossed over it. He only said that they had met a strange person and that the strange person had taken the boat to the chaotic river. In the end, he had led everyone out of danger with a plan. Unexpectedly, they encountered a storm and the boat capsized. Only he and Rong Yang escaped. He had looked for Yang Ziyuan nearby for a long time, but there was no trace of her. His story was 70% true and 30% false. Lord Yang believed him without a doubt. He also thought that his daughter had died and was very sad. He blurted out, "It must be that Yi Feng who is playing tricks." Under Ji Yuxian's questioning, Lord Yang told him what had happened 3 years ago. Yi Feng's arrival was the same as what Yang Ziyuan had told Ning Xuemo. He had captured Lord Yang and wanted to be Yang Ziyuan's bodyguard. Lord Yang had been on tenterhooks for the past few years, afraid that Yi Feng would harm his daughter's life. Later, when he saw that he had been protecting Yang Ziyuan, he was slightly relieved. However, he always felt that this unknown man with amazing martial arts was harboring evil intentions. He had always been on his guard. Now that he heard that his daughter had died, he immediately thought of this matter. He thought that Yi Feng was behind the scenes and hated Yi Feng to the bone. Because he did not see his daughter's bones, Lord Yang was not willing to give up. He sent many troops to the chaotic river to search for his daughter's whereabouts. Who knew that not long after he sent out the troops, Yang Ziyuan would actually come back? Lord Yang was naturally overjoyed. However, he did not expect that Yang Ziyuan would ask her father to help her save Yi Feng the moment she came back. Ji Yuxian still remembered Yang Ziyuan's condition at that time. Her hair was disheveled and she had lost a lot of weight. Her clothes were also dirty because of the long journey. At that time, Lord Yang was at Ji Yuxian's place. Yang Ziyuan directly barged in and knelt in front of Lord Yang. She said that Yi Feng was Sharkman. He had saved her life in the chaotic river but was taken away by Yi Qingwan. She did not know if he was dead or alive. She begged Lord Yang to find someone to save Yi Feng no matter what. At that time, Ji Yuxian was sitting next to her and even called out to her a few times. However, Yang Ziyuan ignored him. Lord Yang hated Yi Feng to the bone. Even if he knew that Yi Feng had saved his daughter, his view did not change much. It was impossible for him to save Yi Feng. Moreover, he did not have any connections to save someone from Yi Qingwan. Chapter 1043. In fact, even if he had this ability, he didn't want to use it. He wanted Yi Feng to die at Yi Qingwan's place and never come back. City Lord Yang pretended to agree to his daughter's request, but he didn't do anything. Yang Ziyuan asked her father about the rescue almost every day, which made City Lord Yang very annoyed. He felt that his daughter was bewitched. As long as he found a good husband for her to marry, she wouldn't think about that sharkman anymore. Coincidentally, at this time, Jiyu Xian finally recognized his own feelings and came to the Yang residence to ask for a marriage. City Lord Yang knew that his daughter used to like Jiyu Xian. Originally, he thought that Jiyu Xian didn't have any family background, so if his daughter married him like this, it would be a waste. But at this time, he wanted to divert his daughter's attention, so he happily agreed. He didn't expect that when Yang Ziyuan heard this news, her reaction would be fierce. She didn't agree at all. Some people were the kind of people who wanted more the more they couldn't get it, and Jiyu Xian was the representative of this kind of people. When Yang Ziyuan liked him, he felt annoyed and wanted to kick her away. But when Yang Ziyuan really gave up on him and fell in love with someone else, he felt uncomfortable. He also felt that Yang Ziyuan was good, so he didn't want to let her go. Yang Ziyuan's rejection of the marriage made him lose face, but his desire to get her was even stronger. Just at this time, that black-clothed masked man came to find him. At that time, Jiyu Xian was at his wits' end. Naturally, he hit it off with that black-clothed man. This was the reason why Yang Ziyuan fell under the twin life curse and fell head over heels in love with him. She was willing to accept his proposal and wholeheartedly become his bride. Jiyu Xian thought that he would finally succeed, but he didn't think that something like this would happen on the day of the wedding. When he was poisoned, he had actually suspected that Yihan Shanyu had poisoned him when he was drinking, but he felt that it wasn't very likely. Because in his impression, Master Han was a proud and arrogant person. He wouldn't use such petty tricks. Moreover, on the day of the wedding, when he had just woken up from his coma, Ning Shuamore had said that the antidote was the ice flame flower. This Master Han didn't want to meddle in other people's business and didn't want to come. For the sake of his own life, he had begged and begged again and again before he was able to invite this great master to follow him. Jiyu Xian didn't know the special solution to the twin life curse. Naturally, he didn't know that Ning Shuamore and the others came to the ice field to find the flower for Yang Ziyuan. Therefore, he couldn't figure out why Master Han would trick him to come here and risk his life. No matter how he thought about it, he still felt that Master Han was doing this for Ning Shuamore's sake so that Yang Ziyuan wouldn't be a widow. Along the way, Ning Shuamore was cold enough to him. Yi Feng was originally cold to him. As for that Master Han, he had always been proud and aloof. He simply ignored him. He also knew that these people didn't fall out with him because of his relationship with Yang Ziyuan. Therefore, he endured it and tried his best not to provoke them. He didn't want to find trouble for himself. But in his heart, he had made up his mind. Once his body recovered, he would urge Yang Ziyuan to completely cut off all ties with these people and never come in contact with them again. This way, he could live the life he wanted with Yang Ziyuan, with two beauties by his side. From time to time, he would participate in a scholarly gathering, play the zither, do some painting, and discuss life. That would be a romantic and comfortable life. Of course, to be Jiyu Xian's woman, in the future, 3 obedience and 4 virtues were a must. After he went back, he would slowly let Yang Ziyuan learn these things. Chapter 1044. In the future, Yang Ziyuan would be able to take care of the affairs of the mansion for him. She would be a good wife, take care of her husband and teach her children. She would wash his hands and make soup for him. When she was tired, she would massage his shoulders and legs. She would be a real good woman. This was Jiyu Xian's entire plan. He thought that after Yang Ziyuan was cursed with the twin life curse, as long as she married him, even if the twin life curse was broken in half a year, she would still be loyal to him and would not have any other thoughts. However, he did not expect that in these few days of getting along, Yang Ziyuan's eyes would become more and more attracted to Yi Feng. In her deepest subconscious, it seemed that she still relied on Yi Feng. It was just that she did not know it yet. If this went on, if she got along with Yi Feng for a few more days, it was hard to guarantee that Yang Ziyuan would not be attracted to Yi Feng again and break off the engagement. He knew Yang Ziyuan's temperament very well. Once she got serious, she would not care about anything. This made Jiyu Xian have a very serious sense of crisis. Once his safety was guaranteed, he would consider ways to get Yang Ziyuan once and for all. Just now, He really wanted to take Yang Ziyuan to a place where no one could see and use his outstanding flirting skills to get Yang Ziyuan, so that she would not have any other thoughts. However, he did not expect that Yang Ziyuan would actually refuse. He looked at Yi Feng. After a few days of practice, Yi Feng was quite good at building ice houses. In just an hour, he had already built half of it. It seemed that there would be no problem for 3 people to sleep in it. This damn shark men. Since Jiyu Xian almost raped Yang Ziyuan, he had been sleeping with them. He was always with them, so he did not even have time to be alone with Yang Ziyuan. At this time, his feelings towards Yi Feng were very complicated. He could not bear to leave him, but he also hated him. With Kirin glaring at them from the side, Jiyu Xian could not force Yang Ziyuan to leave. So, he smiled and said, "We're just going to walk around here for a while to stretch our muscles. We won't be too far from here." To this point, Yang Ziyuan did not raise any objections. Sure enough, she obediently allowed him to hold her hand and stroll around the ice tower. Kirin had been instructed by its master to follow Yang Ziyuan and Jiyu Xian as long as they were alone. Jiyu Xian originally wanted to take Yang Ziyuan to a remote place to do his deed, but when he turned around, he saw Kirin's sharp eyes. Under the gaze of such a pair of eyes, he didn't dare to have any dirty thoughts. Later on, he held hands with Yang Ziyuan and enjoyed the beautiful scenery nearby. He was very talented. Not only did he know how to play the piano, but he also knew how to recite poems. In addition, the unique scenery here made him very interested in poetry. He casually recited a poem and won Yang Ziyuan's praise. Occasionally, he would even make her laugh non-stop. "Ziyuan, I heard that you can sing very well. Why don't you sing for me?" Jiyu Xian was in the mood again. "Sure." Yang Ziyuan was also very straightforward. She was very proud. "I can not only sing, but also dance. Do you want to see?" "Yes." Yang Ziyuan was naturally very happy to be able to show off her talents in front of her sweetheart. She lowered her head and thought for a while. Sure enough, she sang, "Woo woo, the sea breeze blows, hoo-a-la-la, the waves roll. I play the wind and waves swing. Hoo-hoo-hoo, the sea breeze blows, hoo-a-la-la, the waves roll, my skirt swayed under the stars." This was a song that was deep in her memory. It was as if it was engraved in her heart when she was a child. Even she did not know when she learned it. Chapter 1045. In fact, she had never been to the seaside before coming here, but she would occasionally see the sea in her dreams. She dreamed that she was singing and dancing on top of the waves under the starlight, singing this song. The tune of this song was beautiful and soothing, as if an innocent mermaid had unfolded her skirt in the wind and danced with the rise and fall of the waves. It was quiet, peaceful, and the world seemed to be moved by her singing. The originally howling cold wind seemed to be much smaller. They were not far from Yi Feng, so Yi Feng could naturally hear the noise they made. When the song rang out, Yi Feng's hand trembled. An ice brick in his hand fell to the ground and hit his foot. Beads of blood came out, but he did not seem to notice. He turned his head and looked at Yang Ziyuan's dancing figure. His face was happy and sad, and his heart was filled with mixed feelings. This song was sung when she was still Yi Yu. He had written the lyrics, composed the music, and sung by Yi Yu's heavenly voice. It could make all the shark men intoxicated. He did not expect that she would still remember this song after becoming Yang Ziyuan, singing it at this time. "Ziyuan, Ziyuan, could it be that you have not completely forgotten your previous life and still have some memories?" He was a little absent-minded. He did not even notice when Jiyu Xian and Yang Ziyuan came back. "Aya, Yi Feng, your foot is injured. Why are you so careless?" Yang Ziyuan's voice suddenly rang out. Yi Feng seemed to wake up from a dream. He looked down at his foot and saw that the wound was not small. The blood soaked his entire foot red. He did not feel pain until now, but his many years as a shadow guard made him very resistant to pain, so his face only paled a little before he calmly pulled his foot back. "It's no big deal." This small injury was nothing to him, so he was too lazy to bandage it. He only used a water spell on his foot to wash away the blood and then went to build the ice house. Jiyu Xian sized up the igloo, and his heart was moved. This igloo was much bigger than the previous ones, and it was also much sturdier. Was Yifeng planning to rest here for a while longer? Are you planning to stay here for a long time? Another hour later, the construction of the igloo was finally completed. Yifeng laid out a few layers of snow wolf pelts inside and invited them in to sit down. He said, "You guys can rest here for a while and recover your strength. I will go out to look for the icy flame flower. This way, we can move faster." It would be much faster for him to travel alone on the ice field, and Yang Ziyuan would no longer have to suffer from frequent travel. Although she didn't say anything along the way, Yifeng had already noticed that her hands and feet were all frostbitten because of running in the snow. Her small hands were as cold as carrots, and her cheeks were frozen solid. He built this igloo so that Yang Ziyuan could have a good rest and warm up here. And with this igloo, the ferocious beasts in the snow would not be able to attack them for a while. And with Kirin by their side to protect them, there should be no danger at all. He explained his idea, and Jiyu Xian was naturally very supportive. He was already tired, and to have such a place to shelter from the wind and snow was naturally what he wanted. Of course, in order to show his generosity, he still said some high-sounding words, saying that if it wasn't for Ziyuan, he would rather go out to explore and so on. Yifeng, of course, did not pay any attention to his words. He did all this not for Jiyu Xian in the first place, and there was no need for him to owe him a favor. Chapter 1046. Yang Ziyuan didn't say anything. Firstly, she was really too tired. Her hands and feet were still trembling. Secondly, she felt that if Yifeng didn't bring her and Jiyu Xian along, the efficiency of looking for the flowers would be higher. Yifeng said a few words and then walked out. He told Kirin what he wanted. Kirin was busy bathing itself and nodded, "Don't worry. With this mythological beast here, the two of them are very safe." Yifeng looked back at Yang Ziyuan and saw that Yang Ziyuan's eyes were still on Jiyu Xian. She didn't even look at him. His eyes darkened and he turned around to leave. White snow, black clothes, strong wind, long sword. Yifeng's figure gradually disappeared into the distance. It seemed that loneliness always lingered around him. It made her feel inexplicably annoyed and a little distressed. Yang Ziyuan looked at Yifeng's departing figure and was slightly absent-minded. It took her a long time to come back to her senses when Jiyu Xian called her name. "Ziyuan, I heard that he was your brother in your previous life." Jiyu Xian's expression was unclear. Not knowing why, Yang Ziyuan was slightly annoyed. "Yes. Yifeng really dotes on you. It seems that you two were very close in your previous life." Jiyu Xian probed. "It should be. I don't remember." Yang Ziyuan's mood was getting more and more annoyed. It seemed that she didn't want Yifeng to be her brother. Not knowing why, Yang Ziyuan suddenly felt a little disgusted with Jiyu Xian in front of her. She was shocked. How could she have such thoughts about Jiyu Xian? He was the master of Xian whom she liked since she was a child. He was the one she wanted to marry. She tried her best to hypnotize herself, but there was always a voice in her heart asking, "Is it like this?" She was in a daze for a moment. Jiyu Xian obviously saw her impatience. His eyes deepened. "Ziyuan, come here and sit beside me." Yang Ziyuan was stunned. "What?" Jiyu Xian smiled faintly. "Are you tired? Is your back sore? Come here, I'll help you unblock your muscles and bones. It'll make it easier for you." His tone was gentle and his words were sweet. Yang Ziyuan was hypnotized. She obediently walked over and sat beside him. Okay. They had been on the move for the past few days, and everyone could no longer care about their image. Yang Ziyuan was the same. Her hair was a little messy, and the bearskin robe wrapped around her body made her look a little bloated. But even so, her disheveled state did not diminish her beauty by much. There was also a strange fragrance on her body that was faint and would not dissipate. Jiyu Xian gently massaged her shoulders. His nose smelled the faint fragrance on her body, and he was a little restless. His lips touched her ear and he sighed softly. "Ziyuan, if it weren't for this strange disease of mine, we would be husband and wife now." Yang Ziyuan was kissed by him. Jiyu Xian often said this to her recently, and every time he said it, it meant that he wanted to bully her again. It was strange. She obviously liked him, but her body seemed to have its own will and was afraid of his touch. She subconsciously dodged to the side and avoided his lips. She took the opportunity to lie down on the wolfskin mattress. I'm sleepy. Jiyu Xian's eyes darkened again. Although her will was controlled by him, her body was rejecting him. He made up his mind and lay down beside her. Their bodies were close together, and he stretched out his arms to hug her. Ziyuan, let's sleep together. Chapter 1047. Just as he was about to forcefully pull her into his embrace, a blue light flashed. Something drilled into the space between him and Yang Ziyuan. Jiyu Xian was caught off guard and pulled the thing into his arms. The cold scales made Jiyu Xian's hands tremble. He anxiously opened his eyes to take a look, and he happened to meet the little Chaline's round eyes. You scum, let go of me. Kirin roared in his ears. Jiyu Xian did not expect that the person he loved would be hugging a Kirin instead. He was so scared that he quickly let go of Kirin. The little Chaline rudely used its claws to push his arm to the side and kicked him again, making him move a little further away. Jiyu Xian did not dare to argue with this idiot, so he could only swallow his anger and move to the side. Kirin stretched its limbs and then directly lay between the two of them. It yawned and told Jiyu Xian, you keep watch for the night, I'm going to sleep. Call me if there's any danger. It closed its eyes and meant to sleep. Jiyu Xian was speechless. With this idiot here, all his romantic thoughts were gone. He glanced at Yang Ziyuan, who seemed to be a galaxy away from him. She did not have any other reaction. She pulled a wolfskin blanket over her body and yawned. After a while, she fell asleep. He then looked at Kirin. Kirin glared at him. Why are you looking at me like that? You're a man. Can't you do something as simple as keeping watch? Although Kirin's size was smaller now, its aura was not small. When it glared, it was intimidating. Jiyu Xian did not dare to provoke it. The others probably would not do anything to him for Yang Ziyuan's sake, but this Kirin might not be the same. This guy was more irritable and difficult to talk to. It could do anything in a hurry. Therefore, Jiyu Xian did not dare to provoke it. He even wanted to curry favor with it. You must be tired after running around for the whole day. Take a rest. I'll keep watch. I'll call you if there's any danger. That's more like it. Kirin closed its eyes in satisfaction. It finally had the time to contact its master. After a while, a reply came from the other side. Kirin, how are things on your side? It's very safe. Jiyu Xian and Yang Ziyuan are resting in the ice house now. What about Yi Feng? Yi Feng went out alone to look for the ice flame flower. He left me behind to take care of the two burdens. Ning Shuamore thought for a moment and understood Yi Feng's meaning. She did not object and asked Kirin a few more questions. She knew that Kirin was very vigilant and had been acting as a third wheel in front of Yang Ziyuan and Jiyu Xian. She was even more relieved. Finally, she instructed Kirin, if Jiyu Xian touches Ziyuan again, you can scratch him. Everything will be fine as long as you leave him alive. Do you understand? Understood. Kirin answered loudly. With its master's words, it could do whatever it wanted. If Jiyu Xian was sensible enough to stop harassing Yang Ziyuan, it would be fine. If he dared to touch her again, it would scratch him until his face was full of peach blossoms. It would let him know that he had to pay a heavy price for flirting with girls under its watch. Its cat-like eyes glanced at Jiyu Xian, making Jiyu Xian shiver inexplicably. He had the illusion that he was being schemed against. After a few hours of digestion and absorption, Ning Shuamore finally absorbed all the water psychokinesis on the blue crystal pillar under the guidance of Shunjioli. Chapter 1048. This crystal nourished Ning Shuamore's wood psychokinesis, increasing the wood psychokinesis in her body by a lot. She only felt that her whole body was full, and her whole body was as light as a feather. Get up and try your skills, Shunjioli said. Ning Shuamore jumped up. She used a lot of strength this time, and with a light jump, she went straight into the air. She hurriedly adjusted her body in the air, did a beautiful backflip, and then lightly landed on the ground. The ancients often used the phrase as light as a swallow to describe people's qigong, and now Ning Xuemore finally tasted the feeling of being as light as a swallow. No, she felt as light as a feather. It was as if a gust of wind could blow her directly into the cloud. Your power is already close to Earth rank level 6. Once you break through to Earth rank level 6, your body will no longer be affected by the suction force of the Earth, and you can practice the flying sword technique. Shinjoli's voice was filled with gratification. This little girl had always been unlucky, but this time, she had a series of fortuitous encounters, which greatly increased her power. Even he was surprised by the speed of her power growth. At this rate, perhaps in less than 2 years, she would be able to cultivate to Earth rank level 8. With her power increasing so quickly, Ning Xuemore was so happy that her eyebrows were curved. At this moment, her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes were bright. In this world of ice and snow, she was like a red tassel slowly blooming in the white snow, full of a kind of soul-stirring beauty. Shinjoli's mind was in turmoil. He raised his hand and pulled her close, encircling her in his arms, and lowered his head to kiss her lips. Xuemore, quickly level up. Recently, he had been kissing her frequently, and Ning Xuemore had already stopped resisting. Sometimes, she would even hug his neck in response. But now, before his lips could touch those seductive red lips, her 2 fingers pressed on his lips, and slightly pushed outwards, making him unable to kiss her. He slightly narrowed his eyes and looked at her, his eyes filled with questions. Ning Xuemore firmly pushed him away with a smile that was not a smile. Great God, I don't want to be taken advantage of by you for no reason. Everything will have to wait until I reach level 8 before you give me an answer. Although she was very sure that she liked him, she also had her own bottom line. She would not confuse herself to him. Before that, I'll just treat him as my master. She didn't want to let herself fall into a true master-disciple relationship, so everything should wait until his attitude was clear. Shinjoli looked down at her. It seemed that he could no longer be intimate with her before he gave her a definite answer. He didn't say anything else and only raised his hand to pat her head. Then hurry up and level up. Guru, among your disciples, who leveled up the fastest? Ning Xuemore shook her head to avoid his hand and walked backwards. You. Shinjoli spat out a single word. I'm indeed the smartest. Ning Xuemore said proudly, like a little witch asking a magic mirror. You're not modest at all. Excessive modesty is arrogance. Ning Xuemore raised her head handsomely. I'm just telling the truth. Oh, that's true. But you're not the smartest, I'm the smartest. Haha, you're an old fox. Old fox. Shinjoli repeated this word with a smile that was not a smile. His figure suddenly approached her. Ning Xuemore immediately stepped back and smiled. My mistake, my mistake. You've lived for thousands of years, but you're still a young man. Shinjoli was speechless. Ning Xuemore still walked backwards. Guru, you must have been abnormally smart when you were young, right? Tell me about your teenage years. She was actually very curious about the guru's past. Chapter 1049. Shinjoli lowered his eyes and said, It's been too long. I don't remember. That was true. He had lived for so long. How could he remember things that happened thousands of years ago? Asking him to remember when he was a teenager should be like asking her to remember when she was a baby. It was so long ago that it felt like a century ago. What are the Almighty's parents like? Which couple would give birth to such a freak? Shinjoli shook his head. I don't have parents. The Almighty was actually an orphan. Ning Xuemore immediately felt that her sympathy was overflowing. They must have passed away a long time ago. So you've been alone all this time. Shinjoli's eyes flashed slightly. He automatically ignored her first question and only answered the second one. Yes, I've been alone all this time. A person's loneliness, a person's desolation. Although he was among all living beings, he was also drifting away from all living beings. His mind was in a trance, and a conversation inexplicably appeared in his mind. Supreme Divinity, aren't you bored being alone all this time? How about I always accompany you in the future? No need. I don't need anyone to accompany me. Aya, it's so boring to be alone. You see people getting married and enjoying family happiness. Aren't you envious just by looking at them? I'm not envious. Chimph, you must be envious. You also want your own family, right? Why don't you marry me? You tried all kinds of ways to climb into my bed just to make me marry you. Of course. You think I just want to have a one-night stand with you? You're a girl, aren't you ashamed to talk to a man like this? Now that you mention it, it's indeed a little embarrassing. Why don't you try to propose to me? The conversation came to an abrupt end. Shinjoli's heart was slightly shocked. He couldn't help but want to think about the conversation, but he couldn't remember anything. All that was left was an indescribable sour feeling. However, this situation was much better than the past. He couldn't remember anything from a long time ago. He calmed himself down and didn't want to think about it anymore. The past was hard to recall. No matter how sweet and thrilling it was just the past. He couldn't even remember anything. Therefore, he could only grasp the present. He had to hold on to the delicate girl in front of him so that he wouldn't have any regrets. Ning Shuamore contacted Kirin again. Knowing that nothing unexpected had happened, she was relieved. Let's go and continue looking for the ice flame flower. The sooner we find it, the sooner we can leave this damned place. Ning Shuamore took the lead and ran forward. She didn't know why, but this place always gave her an ominous feeling. She really wanted to leave as soon as possible. She had just run a few steps when she suddenly felt a burst of heat in her dantian. Her ears buzzed as if her blood was rushing to her head. He immediately felt a little dizzy. She was stunned and immediately stopped in her tracks. What's wrong? Shinjoli had been following her closely. I suddenly felt dizzy. Ning Shuamore shook her head. That strange feeling had already disappeared. Shinjoli didn't say anything. Instead, he grabbed her wrist and checked her pulse. After a while, he let go of her hand. I don't feel anything wrong, it's probably because I haven't slept well these few days. Ning Shuamore didn't mind. She naturally couldn't rest well in such a damned place. Moreover, she had been absorbing the snow spiritual power before and didn't rest at all. She looked forward again. As far as her eyes could see, it was snow white. Chapter 1050. Fortunately, his kung fu was not low. Otherwise, he would have gotten snow blindness if he didn't wear sunglasses for a few days. Where the hell is this ice flame flower? Kirin and the others have searched so many volcanoes, but they couldn't find one, Ning Shuamore said angrily. The ice flame flower is naturally at the intersection of ice and lava, Shinjoli explained. Ning Shuamore was stunned. You mean this flower should be near the crater of the volcano? The crater of the volcano is covered by a thick layer of ice. Do we have to go deep into the ground to look for it? Shinjoli held her hand and walked. It's important to find a fated person to pick the flower. Let's go. Let's see how lucky you are. He was tricking her again. Ning Shuamore looked up unintentionally and saw the clouds in the sky surging and rolling. When did the weather change again? Was there going to be another big snowstorm? Rumble. A series of muffled thunder sounded in the distant sky. Ning Shuamore was surprised. It's common to see storms in the ice field. Why is there thunder? Didn't the weather warm up and thunder only started in spring? No matter how much it snowed in winter, there wouldn't be thunder. Why did the weather here violate the laws of nature? Shinjoli also looked up at the sky. His eyes flashed with a touch of darkness. He said lightly, the weather here can't be judged by common sense. Okay, let's go. The two of them braved the wind and snow and walked forward. What should we do when the snowstorm comes later? Ning Shuamore looked at the lead grey sky and asked him. What's there to be afraid of? Let's just go. Ning Shuamore said, aren't we going to find a place to hide from the wind and snow? Yifeng often builds an igloo. Shinjoli raised his hand and rubbed her head. So you want an igloo? That's easy. I'll build one for you when the wind and snow get heavy. Just as he was speaking, a snowy mist rolled over from the distance. It was clear that a storm was about to arrive. The storm is coming. Where is your ice house? Ning Xuemore tilted her head and looked at him. Shenjoli pulled her to a place where there was no wind. Then, he waved his sleeve to the ground. Then, Ning Xuemore's eyes widened. It was as if there was a knife cutting across the icy ground. Pieces of neatly cut ice bricks jumped up from the ground and automatically arranged themselves. In just a few minutes, a beautiful igloo was formed on the snowy ground. The style of the igloo was quite similar to the layout of her side palace on the Tianyin Peak, except that it was much smaller. The green jade brick turned into an ice brick. There were even engraved patterns on the ice bricks at the entrance. They were simple and beautiful. He waved his sleeve again, and a wave of water came out from his sleeve, pouring onto the ice house. The weather was so cold that a drop of water would turn into ice. After the wave of water hit it, it froze solid in the blink of an eye. It looked like a crystal palace. The Almighty built a house in the blink of an eye as if he was blowing air. Ning Xuemore couldn't help but sigh. Almighty, it's so easy for you to build a house. Why didn't you build one when we were traveling together? If he had shown this ability earlier, they would have suffered less. Shenjoli said lightly, only the Venerable Di Zun knows this ability. Han Shanyu doesn't. Ning Xuemore understood. The Almighty didn't want to reveal his identity as the Venerable Di Zun. This was also true. It seemed that only a few people knew that Han Shanyu was the Venerable Di Zun's incarnation. Naturally, it had to be kept a secret. She was also interested. She pointed her finger forward, and countless vines grew from her fingertips. Jiyu Xian, who was still in a state of shock, had long forgotten about his hunger. Now that he was out of danger and had rested enough, he felt his stomach rumbling. He had been so scared that he ran away that he didn't have much physical strength in the first place. Right now, he only felt extreme hunger. His stomach rumbled like a drum, louder and louder. Grumble. Grumble. Yang Ziyuan suddenly heard a strange sound. Looking for the source of the sound, she realized that Jiyu Xian's stomach was singing the empty fort strategy happily. Jiyu Xian's face turned red. Why did he always make a fool of himself in front of his sweetheart? Yang Ziyuan asked with concern, Xian, are you hungry? I still have some dry food here. You eat first. After saying that, she took out the 2 remaining pastries and handed them to Jiyu Xian. Chapter 1052. Jiyu Xian took it and put it to his mouth. Suddenly, he remembered something. He raised his head and reluctantly handed a piece of pastry back to Yang Ziyuan. Ziyuan, you eat too. Yang Ziyuan was actually very hungry, but she still wanted to leave the food for Jiyu Xian. She shook her head and looked away from the pastry. I'm not hungry, Xian. You're still weak. You eat it. Jiyu Xian said a few more words before he put the pastry in his mouth with satisfaction. He tried to keep his image as a gentleman and ate it. But he was really hungry. A small piece of pastry couldn't solve anything at all. Instead, it made him feel even more hungry. After he finished the first piece, he couldn't help but stare at the last piece of pastry. Yang Ziyuan handed the last piece of pastry over. Jiyu Xian was about to reach out to take it. Karine was furious. Jiyu Xian, are you still a man? You ate all the pastry and let your fiancé watch. Jiyu Xian took the pastry and coughed lightly. He said seriously, how could I eat this pastry by myself? I felt that this pastry had been left outside for too long. It was cold and dry. I wanted to warm it up in my arms before giving it to Ziyuan. Karine snorted. Sophistry. Jiyu Xian put the pastry in his arms and warmed it up for a while. Then, he took out the pastry and held Yang Ziyuan by his side to feed her intimately. Yang Ziyuan felt a little warm in her heart. When she saw Jiyu Xian about to eat the 2 pieces of pastry, she felt a little uncomfortable now. It turned out that Jiyu Xian was afraid that she would eat it cold and wanted to warm it up for her. He still loved her very much. Yang Ziyuan ate the pastry that Jiyu Xian fed her in small bites. After eating some, she looked up. Xian, you eat some too. Jiyu Xian looked like he was struggling. When he was about to go down the slope and feed himself some pastry, Kirin snorted again. Can't help but show your true colors. TSK TSK. Jiyu Xian looked like his flesh was being cut. He waved his hand and pretended to be magnanimous. I'm not eating. Ziyuan, hurry up and eat. I'm already very touched that you accompanied me to the ice field. How can I let you suffer? Yang Ziyuan's eyes flashed with warmth. Xian, we are husband and wife. There's no need to talk about suffering. Wherever you go, I'll go. The little Chelene couldn't take it anymore and turned its head away. This scum of a man's flirting was indeed beautiful, but no matter how beautiful he was, it couldn't change his scum nature. How could Yang Ziyuan like such a two-faced, cowardly and hypocritical person? If Yi Feng lost to this kind of person, it would be the biggest joke in the world. When Yang Ziyuan's curse was broken, Kirin would be the first to bite this scumbag to death. Jiyu Xian wrapped the white wolf skin that he peeled off from the Wolf King and walked around in a circle. The white wolf skin was not very warm, and his skinning technique was not very good. Therefore, a good piece of skin was full of holes after being skinned by him, and the wind was leaking out. He couldn't stop shivering. From time to time, he moved his hands and feet to keep warm. The hunger in his stomach was even stronger. After a long time, he saw that the snow outside had stopped. He was cold and hungry. He couldn't sit still anymore. He looked outside again. 6 to 8 hours had passed, and Yi Feng still hadn't returned. He couldn't help but ask, Kirin, how long do we have to wait? Why is Yi Feng gone for so long? Did he leave us behind and leave by himself? Chapter 1053. Yang Ziyuan couldn't help but look at him and subconsciously refuted him. He won't. Her heart skipped a beat. She actually refuted her husband's words for an unrelated man? Jiyu Xian froze and looked at Yang Ziyuan. His mood wasn't very good. Kirin snorted from the side, don't measure the heart of a gentleman with your petty heart. He won't be as selfish as you. Jiyu Xian's face flushed red. He was able to speak frankly and eloquently in front of those scholars, debating with them. But when he met Kirin, he felt like a scholar meeting a soldier who couldn't reason with him. This mythological beast had a very bad impression of him and didn't give him any face at all. He put on an appearance of not arguing with a child and gently smiled. He said to Yang Ziyuan, Brother Yi is a righteous sharkman and he was your secret guard. He shouldn't abandon us and leave by himself. For some reason, Yang Ziyuan didn't want to hear Jiyu Xian say that Yi Feng was her secret guard. I already said that he was my brother in my previous life. He definitely won't abandon us. Maybe he's still looking for that flower. Let's wait and see. Brother. Yi Feng's feelings for her were definitely not the same as a brother's feelings for his sister. Jiyu Xian sneered in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. His voice was still very gentle. I mean, did he lose his way in the snow and can't find his way back? Why don't we go out to look for him and help him? Yang Ziyuan was a little hesitant. Yi Feng told us to wait here. What if we go out to look for him and he comes back and can't find us? In fact, Jiyu Xian was hungry and wanted to let the little Chelene go out to hunt. The so-called meeting up with someone was just an excuse. He was quite eloquent and said a few more reasons why they had to go out to look for him. Finally, Yang Ziyuan was moved. Jiyu Xian looked at Kirin who was lying on the side. Kirin, before he could finish, he was interrupted by Kirin. Kirin, is Kirin someone like you can call me that? Call me Great God Kirin. This mythological beast is a little hungry and has a bad temper. If you say something wrong again, this mythological beast will directly eat you. Jiyu Xian's response, and he didn't dare to say anything more. He could only endure the hunger in his stomach and tactfully talk to Kirin. Of course, he also talked about the problem of food. He was a man's. Hississississis SSSSSSSSSSST. It was no wonder that he was a scholar. His words were reasonable and meaningful. Finally, the little Cheline was convinced. It got up and swayed its body. You two wait here first. I'll go find some food and help Yifeng along the way. Jiyu Xian shook his head. You can't, great God Kirin. If you leave, who will protect Ziyuan and me? Why don't you take the two of us to look for food? You can leave a mark for Yifeng along the way. That way, Yifeng can follow the mark and find us. You don't have to make an extra trip. That was true. Kirin stopped and weighed the pros and cons. With its current ability, it shouldn't be a problem to protect the two of them. If it really couldn't, it could also lower itself to carry them. In this ice field, Kirin's martial arts might not be the best, but in terms of speed, Kirin was one of the best. There will be a climax tomorrow. Are you looking forward to it? Chapter 1054. Kirin nodded its big head. You too, follow me closely. Kirin felt that its words were unnecessary. Jiyu Xian was now following it all the time, as if it wanted to grow on its body. Kirin could almost flatten it by turning around. Kirin's mouth twitched. You don't have to follow me so closely. I'm afraid that I'll accidentally step on you. Only then did Jiyu Xian put some distance between them. Kirin led the way in front, Yang Ziyuan in the middle, and Jiyu Xian at the back. They maintained this formation and moved forward slowly. Kirin took a few steps and left a paw print on the snow. This way, Yifeng could follow the footprints and find them. Kirin's pace was relatively large, so it unknowingly fell behind the two of them. Only the dim stars in the sky were shining faintly. Everything around them could not be seen clearly. Ah! Yang Ziyuan, who was walking in the middle, exclaimed loudly in the silent night. Kirin hurriedly turned around, only to see Jiyu Xian standing there in a daze. Yang Ziyuan was nowhere to be seen. What happened? Damn, where did Yang Ziyuan go? I lost a person. If Yang Ziyuan died, how could it explain to its master? Kirin hurriedly ran back, only to find that there was a huge ice crack on the ground. It was so dark that it could not see the bottom. This ice crack was originally covered by ice and snow. Yang Ziyuan happened to step on it, so it suddenly sank. Jiyu Xian crouched at the entrance of the cave, looking anxious. Ziyuan, are you in there? Can you hear me? Jiyu Xian's voice echoed in the cave, but Yang Ziyuan's words could not be heard. Kirin looked down. Although it had excellent eyesight, it could not see how deep the cave was. If Yang Ziyuan fell down, he was afraid. Kirin's head exploded. He anxiously walked around the entrance of the cave. No, it had to go down and take a look. If he was alive, it had to see him. If he was dead, it had to see his corpse. After figuring this out, the little Cheline jumped down without any hesitation. Jiyu Xian was left dumbstruck at the entrance of the cave. Jiyu Xian's face turned slightly pale as he looked down at the big hole. That pitch-black hole of unknown depth was like the huge mouth of a monster that was choosing people to devour. His beloved had fallen. He was very anxious, but he didn't have the guts to jump down. Forget it, Kirin should go down. If even Kirin couldn't find her, he wouldn't be able to either. He would only be sending himself to his death. After figuring this out, Jiyu Xian decided to sit beside the cave entrance. This ice crevice was not straight up and down. It was slightly sloped. After Kirin jumped down, he slid down like a whirlwind. The walls of the ice crevice were very smooth and hard. Kirin desperately scratched the walls a few times, but only left a few white marks on the walls. However, the entrance of the cave was quite narrow. Kirin couldn't extend his wings, so he could only use his telekinesis to slightly reduce the speed of his descent. There was a faint smell of Yang Ziyuan in this cave. He was sure that Yang Ziyuan had definitely fallen down, but he was not sure if she was still alive. Kirin shouted, Yang Ziyuan, Kirin. His loud voice echoed in the cave. Kareen almost fainted from the shock. He didn't dare to shout anymore. The lower he went, the more complicated the terrain became. From time to time, there would be one or two huge rocks sticking out. Kareen was caught off guard and almost crashed into one. Fortunately, he slapped out his claws in time and used the reaction force to avoid the huge rock. He continued to roll and crawl down. Chapter 1055. The further it went down, the more frightened it became. It was such a steep slope and such a dangerous terrain. Yang Ziyuan was a weak girl. She would most likely die if she fell down like this, unless a miracle happened. Kareen felt that its heart had sunk to the bottom of a hole. Fortunately, the downward slope had eased a lot. Kareen scratched, and finally slowed down. It was pitch black in the cave. Fortunately, its beast eyes could see in the dark, so Kareen saw a fork in the road not far below. Damn, there is a fork in the road. Which one should I choose? Kareen slid down at lightning speed. Its green eyes were wide open, and it looked anxious. Its big head moved back and forth to smell. Before it could decide which side to choose, the fork in the road was right in front of it. It could not stop its momentum. It made up its mind and chose the hole on the right. Kareen shouted up, "I choose the hole on the right." Hole, hole, hole. The sound was like thunder, echoing back and forth in the cave. Kareen had closed its ears in advance to avoid being destroyed by its own voice. Jiyu Xian was as timid as a mouse. He would not dare to jump down, and he would not dare to walk around. He must be guarding the hole at the moment. The little Chiline's voice was loud enough that it was certain that Jiyu Xian could hear it. When the reinforcements came, they would definitely choose the hole on the left. Kareen adjusted its posture as it fell. It was ready to kiss the ground at any time. Its skin was thick, so it would not be a problem for it to fall once or twice. However, it was afraid that Yang Ziyuan was at the bottom of the cave. It would be bad if she was not killed by the fall, but by the fall. Ah, right. Reinforcements. How could it forget about its master? Kareen immediately contacted Ning Xuemore while it was falling. Master. Ning Xuemore and Shenjoli were also about to set out to find the ice flame flower. Ning Xuemore's heart sank when she heard Kareen's anxious voice. Before she could ask, Kareen had already shouted, "Master, Yang Ziyuan fell into the ice hole. Come and save her with the Almighty." Ning Xuemore's heart suddenly jumped. No one knew better than her how dangerous the ice holes that suddenly appeared on the ice field were. Some of the ice holes were thousands of meters long, as if they led directly to the depths of hell. If Yang Ziyuan fell into such a place with her mediocre skills, she would lose her life. Without saying another word, Ning Xuemore dashed towards the little Chiline's direction. She had already reached Earth Realm Rank 5, so her telepathy with the little Chiline was already completely harmonious. She didn't need the little Chiline to report its location and could quickly locate it. Then, in the shortest time possible, she would be able to find it. Shenjoli picked her up. "Tell me the location, I'll take you there." The Almighty's speed was naturally as fast as flying. After Ning Xuemore told him the location of Kareen, she asked Kareen, "What's going on? Weren't you waiting in the ice house built by Yi Feng? How long has she fallen in?" Kareen's voice was angry. "It's all Jiyu Xian's fault, that scumbag." Jiyu Xian was like an ant on a hot pan. From time to time, he circled around the hole and kept looking at it. Suddenly, Kareen's roar came from the hole. That sound seemed to come from the core of the earth. Jiyu Xian's heart sank. How deep was this hole? Could they still come up? Chapter 1056. He thought that even if his psychokinesis was at its peak, he would not be able to get out of here. Now that he had no psychokinesis, he was just like an ordinary person. It was impossible for him to get out alone. If they could not come up, would he not be trapped here until he died? When he thought of this, his entire face turned pale. Suddenly, Kareen's roar came from the bottom of the hole. I choose the right. Right tilde. Right. Was there a fork in the road? Jiu Zian subconsciously remembered the little Chaline's words. Although the sound was clear this time, it was much weaker. It could be seen how deep Kirene had fallen. It was easy to fall down, but difficult to come up. Kirene was powerful, but could it really come up from such a deep hole? If it could not come up, then he would not be able to contact Ning Shuamore and the rest. His face turned even paler, but he could only wait here. Was he going to wait for death here? Was he, the Guqin saint, going to die in such a remote and desolate place? No. He could not. Thinking of that scene, Jiu Zian's face turned even paler. He was almost scared out of his wits by death. He anxiously circled the hole a few times and almost slipped and fell down. What should I do? What should I do? Right. Yifeng. Yifeng had not fallen down yet. He could definitely bring him out of this ice field. However, if Yang Ziyuan died, Yifeng would probably want to kill him. He would definitely not bring him along. Then he could only count on Ning Shuamore and the rest. Kirene should have informed its master, right? Perhaps Ning Shuamore and the rest would arrive soon. Ziyuan might not be dead yet. Jiu Zian calmed down a little and began to look into the distance from time to time. He had never looked forward to the arrival of Yifeng and Ning Shuamore so much. Yifeng walked through 3 or 4 ice valleys in a row, but the ice flame flowers were still like flowers in the water, the moon in the mirror. He could not find any clues. In the process of searching, he naturally encountered a snowstorm. This storm was unprecedentedly strong, and the sky seemed to be upside down. It was almost impossible to walk in such weather. He could only find a leeward place and hide in the gap between 2 ice rocks to avoid the snow. After the snow stopped, the surrounding scenery changed. The hillside became an ice mountain, and the ice floe became a valley. Fortunately, Yifeng had a special ability to find his way, so he did not get lost. Originally, he wanted to continue looking for Yang Ziyuan, but in the end, he was worried about her. He was afraid that she would be worried if he didn't go back for a long time, and he was also afraid that Jiu Ziyuan would cause trouble again. So after some thought, he decided to go back and take a look first. Along the way, he didn't know why, but he felt a little uneasy. The fear of losing something was like a cage that tightly wrapped around him. He simply increased his speed to the maximum and returned to the ice house in just over 2 hours. No one. Yifeng looked around the room like a whirlwind, but he could not find anyone. What happened? Why was there no one? Did they get attacked by wild beasts? Yifeng looked around carefully. No, it was not a wild beast attack. Everything was clean and tidy, and there were no traces of fighting. He checked the traces of their departure. The traces were neat and tidy. Obviously, they left by themselves. Did they go to look for food? If so, they should have left a mark for him. After figuring this out, Yifeng began to carefully search for the marks that Kirene and the rest had left behind. Chapter 1057. Although there was still wind and snow blowing from time to time, covering the footprints on the ground, there were still many clues left behind. His tracking skills had always been very good, so after searching for a while, he found their marks. Based on the depth of the marks, he calculated how long they had been gone. They had been gone for less than 2 hours. With Kirene by their side, there shouldn't be any great danger. Yifeng's worried heart finally relaxed. He followed Kirene's footprints and rushed in that direction. He was really as fast as lightning. It was fine. Maybe they were just looking for food and wouldn't encounter any monsters. Even if they did, Kirene would be able to deal with them. Yifeng kept comforting himself in his heart, but the uneasiness in his heart was like a black shadow that kept expanding and spreading. The fear for no reason was like a spider that nibbled at him bit by bit. His heart tightened bit by bit, almost suffocating him. While he was running, his heart suddenly beat violently, as if someone had suddenly pinched it. Pain, fear, fear. Countless indescribable emotions flooded his heart. Something had happened. Sharkman's sixth sense had always been very sharp. For him to suddenly have this kind of reaction, Something must have happened to Yang Ziyuan. At this time, Yi Feng's speed had already exceeded the limits of his body. The wind and snow were like knives, slicing into his skin piece by piece. His exposed skin was even cut open. Bright red blood fell to the ground and instantly condensed into red beads. From afar, he saw a white figure standing in front of him, and his heart suddenly sank. That person was Jiyu Xian, but Yang Ziyuan and Kirin were nowhere to be seen. Jiyu Xian saw a black figure in the distance shooting towards them like an arrow. He was delighted. Finally, someone had come. He hurriedly waved his hand and shouted, "Yi Feng, over here, over here." Yi Feng appeared beside him in the blink of an eye and grabbed Jiyu Xian's collar. "Where's Ziyuan?" Jiyu Xian was lifted up like a little chick, and his face turned red. Cough, cough, let go of me, cough, cough. As soon as Yi Feng let go, Jiyu Xian fell to the side. He coughed as he pointed at the crack in the ice and said, "Ahem, Ziyuan." Ziyuan fell down. "Ahem." Kirin also jumped down. "There's still no movement." "Why?" Yi Feng looked into the crack in the ice and his head exploded. She fell into such a deep crevice by herself. He did not wait for Jiyu Xian to finish his words and jumped into the crevice. Jiyu Xian, he was stunned for a moment, then suddenly rushed to the entrance of the cave and shouted, "Kirin chose the passage on the right." Kirin chose the right passage. There was no sound coming from the cave. The cave was like a black hole, swallowing everything that entered it. Yi Feng naturally heard that sentence and silently noted it down. Although he was falling at a high speed, he did not panic at all. It was as if he was on flat ground. He carefully observed the traces around him. There were a few scratch marks on the walls of the cave. Judging from the length and strength of the scratch marks, they should have been left by Kirin. Ziyuan did not have that much strength. How was Ziyuan now? Was she injured? Yi Feng was burning with anxiety. But he was a rational person after all. He could control his panic and tried his best to calm down. A moment later, he saw the fork in the road from afar. He turned around and slid into the passage on the left. "Ziyuan, Ziyuan, you must stay alive. Wait for me." Chapter 1058. Jiyu Xian shouted at the entrance of the cave for a long time, but there was no response. He was so angry that his face turned red and he angrily stomped his feet. These idiots. He had hoped for the stars and the moon for a savior, but in the end, he jumped down again. Jiyu Xian almost wanted to curse. But what else could he do? He could only obediently wait for a miracle to happen. He looked around, afraid that another monster would jump out. Right now, he was the only one here, so he didn't have any ability to resist. If a monster came, he could only be a snack. After an unknown amount of time, he suddenly heard a deep rumbling sound coming from underground. It seemed like something underground had collapsed and the ground under his feet was shaking. Jiyu Xian was standing at the edge of the ice crack and was almost shaken to the point of falling down. He was so scared that his face turned pale. He quickly took a few steps back and tripped on a piece of ice, falling down on his butt. He accidentally sat on a sharp piece of ice. It almost hit his butt. He groaned in pain and jumped up while holding his butt. He spun in a circle and his face turned pale and his body trembled. He was jumping up and down in pain when a faint white light flashed in the distance and two people appeared in front of him. He looked carefully and was overjoyed. "Madam Ning, Mr. Han, you're finally here. Quickly save Ziyuan and the others." Ning Shuemore already knew the general situation from Kirin. She looked at the man in front of her and wished she could kick him down. She looked into the ice crack. It was so deep that she couldn't see the bottom. How long has it been since Ziyuan fell down? Is there any movement down there? She fell down almost 2 hours ago. Yi Feng also went down, and Kirin, there's no news from them. There was a tremor coming from below. It seems like a cave has collapsed. Jiyu Xian told her everything he knew. Cave? Ning Shuemore's expression became even worse. It would be a miracle if someone didn't die from falling into the ice crack. If there was another cave, she could only go down to investigate. Just as she was about to contact Kireen again, a green light flashed not far away. Kireen ran over like a whirlwind. "Master, you're here." Jiyu Xian was dumbfounded. This Chileen clearly jumped down from this crack in the ice. Why did it run back from afar? "Little apple, cut the crap. What's the situation inside?" Ning Xuemo immediately asked. "It's complicated. The slope was very steep, and I couldn't stop falling. There was also a fork in the road, and I chose the one on the right. Yang Ziyuan wasn't there. After I fell to the bottom, I searched for her, but there was no trace of her. She must have fallen into the hole on the left. The cave was steep and narrow, so I couldn't go back the way I came. I could only grope my way forward. It took me a lot of detours to get out. Then, did you notice that the ground was sinking?" "No, the path I took was very normal. It was just that when I was about to reach the exit, I felt a slight tremor. Even if the ground sank, it wasn't the path I was on." Speaking up to this point, the little Cheleen's voice suddenly stopped. If it wasn't on the path it was on, then it was on the path Yang Ziyuan fell into. It turned around and wanted to jump down again. "I'll go to the other hole to check. Little apple, stay up here. Guru, let's go down." Ning Xuemo ordered and stopped Kireen in his tracks. A white figure flashed in front of them. Ning Xuemo pulled Shenjoli and jumped into the crack. Chapter 1059. Jiyu Xian was speechless. He wanted to say, "Since the ground has caved in, Ziyuan and Yi Feng must have met with misfortune. We shouldn't waste our efforts." But before he could finish his sentence, Ning Xuemo and Han Shanyu were nowhere to be seen. His heart suddenly sank. If Yang Ziyuan and Yi Feng had met with misfortune down there, then Ning Xuemo and Han Shanyu would probably not care about him anymore. Not to mention curing his incurable disease, he might not even be able to walk out of this ice field. His heart was filled with fear as he glanced at the little Chileen beside him. His eyes turned slightly before he suddenly knelt down and prayed loudly to the heavens, "May the heavens bless and protect Ziyuan. Disciple is willing to sacrifice 10 years of his lifespan in exchange for her safety." Kireen glanced at him coldly. If this man didn't cast the twin curse on Yang Ziyuan, why would they come to this godforsaken place? Why would Yang Ziyuan fall into the ice hole and have no idea whether she was dead or alive? He was the main culprit. Kireen clenched its claws and tried to control its emotions. It didn't fly into a rage immediately. If Yang Ziyuan and Yi Feng were fine, then it would forget about it. If Yang Ziyuan had met with misfortune, then it wouldn't hesitate to tear this man into pieces and feed him to the wolf. Yang Ziyuan didn't know how long she had been rolling down. The cave was dark and silent. Time seemed to have stopped here. She tried to stop herself from falling, but to no avail. She could only adjust her body while rolling. She knew some kung fu, so this kind of adjustment was very useful for her. At least she managed to avoid some protruding rocks and sharp ice. She was dizzy and had to accept her fate as she waited for the moment she reached the bottom of the cave. Fortunately, as she rolled, the slope seemed to be getting gentler. She shouldn't die from the fall. However, she was, after all, a rich young lady who had never experienced the vicissitudes of life. Although she had followed Ning Xuemo to the snowfield and learned a lot of knowledge that she couldn't learn in the boudoir and had become bolder, she was still afraid of the dark. Coupled with the fear of the unknown in front of the inky darkness, her heart tightened into a ball as she frantically rolled around. For some reason, the first person she thought of wasn't Jiyu Xian, but Yi Feng. Including when she instantly fell into the hole, she subconsciously called out Yi Feng's name. She recalled the time when he rescued her from the monster's mouth. He was worried that she would be scared, so he thoughtfully covered her eyes. "Don't be scared, I'm here." With him around, she always felt at ease. But he wasn't there. Yi Feng, where are you?" "I'm so scared." She didn't know how long she had been rolling down. Maybe it was a few minutes, or maybe it was a few seconds. Just when she felt that she was about to roll into hell, a red light suddenly appeared in front of her eyes. Yang Ziyuan subconsciously closed her eyes. Then, her body suddenly stopped. It seemed like she had fallen somewhere. She fell so hard that her vision turned black and she almost fainted. I can't faint, I can't faint. She desperately bit her lips. That sharp pain pulled her back a little. Then, she slowly opened her eyes. After a long period of darkness, she suddenly saw light. Her vision was hazy, and then she felt that it was a red light that was almost as bright as the stars. Yang Ziyuan wanted to open her eyes to see clearly, but her vision suddenly turned black and she fainted. Blue sky, white clouds, sea, flying seagulls, beautiful sharkmen. Chapter 1060. Yang Ziyuan was in a daze as if she had a very long dream. In the dream, she seemed to have become a mermaid, freely swimming in the blue waves. Ziyuan, wake up, Ziyuan, wake up. After an unknown amount of time, Yang Ziyuan felt someone anxiously calling her name. Her eyelashes trembled, her fingers moved, and she finally woke up. Her vision was still a bit hazy because she had lost too much blood. She couldn't see the person in front of her clearly. In the blur, she seemed to see Yi Feng's anxious face in the red light. She reached out her hand. Yi Feng. Is that you? Did you come to save me? Am I hallucinating? Yi Feng grabbed her hand. Her hands were originally as tender as spring onions, white and soft, but now they were dripping with blood. The pink wounds were slightly open. It's me, Ziyuan, Ziyuan, you have to hold on. Yi Feng's voice was trembling. When he arrived, Yang Ziyuan was lying in a pool of blood. She had already lost consciousness. There were many abrasions all over her body. Although the wounds weren't deep, for some reason, the blood kept flowing. In this kind of environment, any insignificant wound could be fatal. Yang Ziyuan was extremely weak now. When she saw Yi Feng, her uneasy heart finally calmed down. It was good that he came. She was safe with him here. Yang Ziyuan relaxed and fainted again. Her clothes were tattered, her face was pale and haggard. Her lips that were once as bright as flower petals were now as pale as a flower in the rain. It seemed like they could wither at any time. Yi Feng held her hand tightly. His face was even paler than Yang Ziyuan's. Yang Ziyuan in his arms seemed to have turned into Yi Yu from his previous life. Her body was covered in blood, and her body was turning cold in his arms, but he was helpless. No, he couldn't let her walk down the same path as in his previous life. No matter what, he had to make sure she was fine. He couldn't let her die in his arms again. He helped her up so that her back was facing him. Then, he placed his hands on her back to heal her injuries. Ziyuan, you must hang in there, hang in there. Yi Feng sent Sharkman's will of origin into Yang Ziyuan, checking her wounds and broken meridians before gently healing them. Gradually, the wounds on her body began to heal and scab over. Her face was slightly flushed and her cold hands and feet began to warm up. After about an hour, Yang Ziyuan finally woke up. Her vision gradually cleared. Suddenly, she felt someone behind her. She turned her head and saw Yi Feng treating her injuries. Just as she was about to speak, Yi Feng shook his head at her, signaling her to be quiet. Yang Ziyuan then obediently maintained her cross-legged posture, allowing Yi Feng's psychokinesis to continuously flow into her body. She felt warmth all over her body, and the painful wounds from before seemed to be slowly healing. It really was him. So he really came to save her. Yang Ziyuan suddenly had the urge to cry. She didn't cry when no one responded to her when she asked for help. She didn't cry when she was alone in the dark and her life was in danger. She didn't cry when she kept falling and getting scratched. But now, when she saw Yi Feng, she felt wronged and afraid. She couldn't help but feel a lump in her throat, and tears kept welling up in her eyes. She was afraid that she would distract Yi Feng, so she forced herself to hold back her tears. Like a small stone being thrown into the water, at first it was a small ripple, but then it gradually rippled through her entire heart. There was a burst of warmth that kept washing over her. Chapter 1061. There was a burst of warmth that washed away the anxiety and fear. It was like a spring breeze in March, dispelling the darkness and bringing light. After another incense stick worth of time, Yifeng finally stopped. He wanted to get up, but he suddenly felt powerless. He held onto the cave wall to support himself. His face was pale and his forehead was covered in sweat. It was clear that healing Yang Ziyuan had consumed a lot of his energy. Yang Ziyuan quickly got up and supported his swaying body. She asked with concern, "Are you all right?" Yifeng closed his eyes and waited for the dizziness to pass. He had used too much of the mermaid's original telekinesis to heal all the wounds on Yang Ziyuan's body. His energy had been consumed too quickly. It was like losing a lot of blood, so dizziness was normal. He opened his eyes again and saw Yang Ziyuan's bright eyes looking at him anxiously. He knew that she was worried about him. His heart warmed and his voice became gentle. "I'm fine." Yang Ziyuan had been supporting Yifeng. She was afraid that if she let go, Yifeng would fall. Hearing him say that he was fine, her beautiful eyebrows slightly knit together. "Yifeng, you should rest a bit more. Don't force yourself. Don't force yourself." Yi Yu had said this to him many times. Today, he had finally heard it from her mouth again. Yifeng stared at her for a while. His eyes seemed to be filled with emotions. His voice was slightly hoarse, as if he was trying to suppress something. "All right, I won't force myself." Yang Ziyuan didn't know why her heart was in a trance. A voice seemed to pass through thousands of mountains and rivers, carrying a bit of love. "I promise you, I won't force myself." Her heart suddenly throbbed with pain. This feeling was both sweet and sad, making her feel at a loss. Yifeng sat cross-legged and entered a meditative state to recuperate. Yang Ziyuan stayed by his side, quietly lost in thought. Her mind was in a mess before, but for some reason, when she saw Yifeng's calm face, her chaotic thoughts gradually calmed down. Yifeng had this kind of invisible power that made people feel at ease, calm, and as steady as a mountain. After about the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Yifeng slowly exhaled and stopped. When he stood up again, his complexion was much better. Yang Ziyuan also stood up and carefully looked at his complexion. After confirming that he was fine, she let out a long sigh of relief, feeling as if a large stone had been lifted from her heart. Only then did she remember Jiyu Xian. "Yifeng, have you seen Xian?" Yifeng's eyes darkened. "He's up there. He's safe." Jiyu Xian was up there. In other words, Yifeng jumped down by himself to save her. Her heart was moved again. Yifeng quietly observed his surroundings. After a while, he said quietly, "We can't go out from the exit above. There's a cave here, let's explore." He didn't feel at ease leaving Yang Ziyuan alone, so he could only bring her along. Yang Ziyuan began to pay attention to her surroundings. She exclaimed, "What a beautiful place." This place was very strange. No one would have thought that there would be such a beautiful scene under the cave. Everywhere was crystal clear red. They were surrounded by red crystals, red icicles, red ice blades, and red towers. They were like the purest red crystals, shining with a soul-stealing light. The temperature here was just right, a few dozen degrees higher than the temperature above the cave. Yang Ziyuan even felt a little hot. Chapter 1062. The place they were in just happened to be a smooth and spacious area, and not far away, there was a row of blood-red mountain peaks. Yang Ziyuan only felt a chill run down her spine. If they had slid a few more meters, they would have directly crashed into the sharp mountain peaks. The consequences would have been unimaginable. And above them, there was a pitch-black cave entrance. They had fallen from there, and both of them knew how steep it was. So they also knew that they would definitely not be able to climb up. And right in front of them, there was another cave entrance. What was different from the previous cave entrance was that this one was very bright, so bright that it was somewhat dazzling. Inside the cave, there was a sparkling red passageway with countless twists and turns, making it impossible to see the end. All of this was a masterpiece of nature, and one couldn't help but gasp in amazement. Yifeng walked in front, and Yang Ziyuan followed behind. The two of them walked very carefully. Yi Feng would sometimes knock on the cave wall and casually throw a crystal in front of them. After confirming that there were no problems, he protected Yang Ziyuan as they walked forward. If they weren't trapped here at this time, Yang Ziyuan would definitely appreciate the uncanny workmanship of nature. Who would have thought that there would be such a warm and beautiful place a few thousand meters under the frozen snowfield? More importantly, there was actually plenty of oxygen here, so Yang Ziyuan didn't feel stuffy at all. Yang Ziyuan was still quite vigilant at first, obediently following behind Yi Feng, and only used her curious eyes to look around at the red crystals. But after walking for a long distance and still nothing happened, she finally couldn't suppress the desire in her heart, and after obtaining Yi Feng's permission, she touched the crystal cave wall. It was cold and smooth to the touch, and it was very comfortable. Yang Ziyuan began to touch here and there, and Yi Feng had always doted on Yang Ziyuan, so after confirming that there was no problem, he naturally let her do as she pleased. Of course, he wouldn't let Yang Ziyuan be too far away from him. The more beautiful a place was, the more likely it was to be dangerous. This was his experience after living for thousands of years. Even though he was walking in front of Yang Ziyuan and didn't look back from beginning to end, no matter how fast or slow Yang Ziyuan walked, he always kept a distance of 3 meters from her, not an inch more or less. This distance would make her feel safe and less resistant to him. And when she was really in danger, he would be able to protect her in time and not let her get hurt again. It's so warm here. It would be great if Xian could come in too. Yang Ziyuan thought of Jiyu Xian, who was still starving in the ice and snow. Yi Feng's back stiffened slightly. He didn't say anything. When Jiyu Xian saw his beloved fall into the ice crevice, he didn't even have the intention to follow her down. That kind of person was definitely not Ziyuan's man. If she married Jiyu Xian, it would definitely be a disaster in the future. But how could he stop it when the time came? Yi Feng had a lot on his mind, but he didn't show it on his face. He continued to walk forward without saying a word. This place was beautiful, but it seemed to be filled with a kind of death aura. Other than the sound of their footsteps and the occasional conversation, there was no other sound. It was as silent as a tomb. If Yang Ziyuan was walking here alone, she would have been scared out of her wits. But now that Yi Feng was by her side, she actually felt strangely at ease. It was as long as he was by her side, even if the sky fell, she wouldn't be afraid, because Yi Feng would hold it up for her. From time to time, crystalline crystals would appear in this cave. They were of different shapes and shined with different lusters. Chapter 1063. Yang Ziyuan inadvertently looked forward and saw a piece of red crystal. It was as big as a person's palm and vaguely had the shape of a mermaid. Her heart skipped a beat. She ran over and picked it up. Just as she held the crystal in her hand, she suddenly heard a gust of wind above her head. Be careful. Before Yang Ziyuan could react, her body fell into someone's arms. That person spun quickly with her and waved his sleeve again. Pa. Boom. An object moved half a foot and crashed to the ground. 2 consecutive loud noises shook the cave, causing the ground beneath their feet to tremble. Yang Ziyuan opened her eyes in shock and found herself in Yi Feng's arms. At the place where she was standing, there was a huge crystal. That crystal was slightly slanted. Obviously, it was due to Yi Feng's palm. Yang Ziyuan's heart was beating fast. If Yi Feng didn't move her away in time, she would have been slapped under the crystal and become a meat patty. Thank you. She murmured in his arms and forgot to push him away for a moment. His steady heartbeat was right next to her ear, making her heart beat faster. With me, you don't have to be polite. Yi Feng let go of her and took a few steps back, still keeping a safe distance from her. Suddenly leaving his arms, Yang Ziyuan felt a little disappointed. She calmed down and looked at the big stone. Where did this stone fall from? Yi Feng raised his head and looked at the ceiling. A hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. Although the cave wall above was crisscrossed with all kinds of crystals like fangs, there were no traces of it ever being broken. This big rock did not seem to have fallen from above. Then where did this big stone fall from? This big stone fell in a strange way. What was even stranger was that it just happened to block the passage they came from. Yifeng walked over to take a look. This big stone had already reached the top of the cave and had completely blocked their way. Unless he turned into his original body or a water snake, he would be able to swim out from the edge of this big stone. He raised his hand and pushed again, but the boulder didn't budge. It was as if it had grown on the ground in an instant. Yifeng frowned slightly. With his current strength, not to mention such a huge boulder, even if it was twice the size of this boulder, he would still be able to push it. But now, it was as if it was cast iron on the ground. It didn't shake at all. In other words, their path was sealed, and they could only move forward. We can't go back, right? Yang Ziyuan was nervous and couldn't help but ask. Don't worry, we'll find another way out. Yifeng comforted her. Yang Ziyuan looked ahead at the endless winding passageway and couldn't help but grab Yifeng's sleeve. I wonder if there's a way out in front. When she listened to those adventure stories, she felt that they were very exciting and hot-blooded. But when this kind of thing happened to her, she knew that the feeling of fear and trepidation was definitely not something an ordinary person could endure. Yifeng lowered his eyes and looked at her little hand that was holding his sleeve. His heart felt sour and warm. Many years ago, she also liked to hold his sleeve and relied on him for everything. His heart shook as he held her hand. Don't worry, we won't be unable to get out. If there were no accidents, Kirin should have already informed Ning Xuemo and Han Shanyu. That Master Han Shanyu was someone who could change the world. As long as he rushed over to save them, there wouldn't be much of a problem. Chapter 1064. During this period of time, he just needed to protect Yang Ziyuan and not let anything happen to her. His voice had the power to calm people's hearts, and Yang Ziyuan's panicked heart finally calmed down. It was only at this moment that she realized she was still desperately pulling on Yifeng's sleeve. Her heart skipped a beat and she finally let go. As if she thought of something, she held the crystal in her hand and waved it in front of Yifeng. Yifeng, what do you think this looks like? Yifeng looked at her palm. He didn't have many romantic cells in his body, so he couldn't see what it was for a while. In his eyes, it was just a normal crystal. His attention was on her little hand. That little hand was red and swollen, and there were many frozen wounds on it. There were even some wounds that were still oozing blood. It was clear how much she had suffered along the way. Yifeng's heart ached. Without saying a word, he took out the bottle of medicine that was left with only a little bit left. He pulled her hand over and applied the precious ointment on her wound. When Yang Ziyuan saw the ointment, her hand couldn't help shrinking back. Yifeng, don't apply this on me. This is life-saving medicine. This is just a small wound from frostbite. It's fine. Yifeng still applied the rest of the ointment on her. His fingers were slightly cold. When he held her hand and applied the ointment, Yang Ziyuan actually felt like there was an electric current on his hand. It went into her heart, and that kind of feeling was warm and sour. It made her eyes inexplicably warm. Yang Ziyuan's heart felt like someone had thrown a stone into the lake. It was very turbulent. She suddenly blurted out, "Were you really my older brother in your previous life?" Yifeng's fingers slightly paused and then he let go of her hand. Right now he didn't know what she was thinking when she broke the twin curse, so he didn't want to explain too much to her. He only gave a faint yen sound. How good would it be if he wasn't her older brother? Otherwise, she would have definitely fallen in love with him in her previous life. Yang Ziyuan's heart suddenly had this thought that scared her. How could he have such thoughts? Could it be that she had fallen for Yifeng? No, this is impossible. She loved Jiyu Xian and was about to marry Jiyu Xian. She couldn't let her imagination run wild. Otherwise, how would she be any different from the promiscuous women she usually despised? She calmly took a few steps back and smiled. Then you should be my brother from now on. I will treat you as my real brother. Yifeng. A hint of sadness flashed through his eyes. It turned out that no matter if it was in the previous life or this life, he could only be her brother. However, this was also good. Back then, He had gambled on his fate with Yi Yu. It was impossible for him and her to be together. This was also good. He turned around and said faintly, "Let's go. We'll find a way to get out." He took the lead and walked forward. Yang Ziyuan walked a few steps behind him and walked side by side with him. She handed over the crystal in her palm. "Yifeng Gij, this is for you." Yifeng was a bit confused as he took the crystal. Yang Ziyuan then said, "Don't you think that this crystal looks a bit like a mermaid? I'll give it to you as a souvenir." Yifeng looked down at the crystal in his hand. After Yang Ziyuan's explanation, he finally felt that this crystal really did look like a mermaid. He slightly held the crystal in his hand. This was the first time Yang Ziyuan had given him something. Although she had casually picked it up, it was still a gift from her and it still had her body temperature. Shuemore said that the flowers have to be eaten immediately after being plucked. But the way in has already been blocked. Where is he going to come in? Yifeng's eyes dimmed. Her heart was only thinking about Jiyu Xian. If the twin curse was broken, she would still be like this. No matter if it was good or bad, there had to be a result. "That's right, brother Yifeng. Do you have a way to contact the people outside?" Yifeng slowly shook his head. "We have been relying on Kirin to contact Miss Ning. Then what should we do?" "Wait." Yifeng only said one word. He believed that Ning Shuemore and the others would come. Yang Ziyuan sighed. "It seems like that's the only way." Chapter 1066. She simply found a place a little further away from the lava river and sat down. She took out the slender crystal from her arms and a sharp dagger for self-defense. She smiled and said, "Since I have nothing to do, I'll carve a small statue of him to pass the time." Yifeng. His fingers touched the mermaid-like crystal that she had just given him. He made up his mind and handed the mermaid crystal to her. "Ziyuan, can you help me carve this first?" This crystal originally had the shape of a mermaid, and it would look more like one with a little carving. And this was perhaps the only thing she could give him. In the future, even if he couldn't be by her side, this thing would be a little comforting. Yang Ziyuan was thinking about how to carve the crystal in her hand. She didn't raise her head when she heard his words, "I'll carve yours later." Yifeng slowly withdrew his hand. Yang Ziyuan seemed to have noticed something. She looked up at him and added, "If there's still time after carving this, I'll carve yours." Yifeng didn't say anything and put the mermaid crystal back into his arms. He lowered his head and was about to tell her to be careful not to cut her hand when suddenly he seemed to have sensed something. His face changed, and his body swept away like smoke. He flew directly to Yang Ziyuan's side. Before she could react, he picked her up and quickly retreated. Yang Ziyuan was caught off guard. The crystal in her hand fell to the ground and broke into several pieces. Yang Ziyuan, she was held in Yifeng's arms and didn't react for a moment. When she reacted, she was already a few feet away in the passage. She was stunned for a moment and looked behind her. It was calm and peaceful there. Nothing had appeared. It was just as usual. There was no danger. Her eyes fell on the broken crystal. Her heart sank and anger surged up. She suddenly struggled in his arms. "Let go of me." However, Yifeng was still hugging her. His eyes were fixed on the lava river, as if he did not hear anything. Yang Ziyuan was furious. Was this person purposely breaking the one she wanted to carve for Jiyu Xian because she didn't carve it for him first? She had always been a spoiled brat. At this moment, she was so angry that she slapped Yifeng without thinking. "Bastard, let go of me." Yifeng couldn't dodge in time, or perhaps he didn't even think of dodging. The slap landed squarely on his cheek, crisp and clear. She had used quite a bit of strength in that slap. Yifeng's head tilted from the force of the slap, and blood trickled down from the corner of his lips. He was startled, and his arms loosened slightly. Yang Ziyuan finally broke free from his embrace and stood on the ground. Yang Ziyuan saw the blood trickling down the corner of his lips and stiffened for a moment. She didn't expect that he would be hit so hard. Her heart was beating wildly. She snorted, "Who told you to take advantage of me? Temph, I didn't expect you to be so petty. You actually broke that crystal of mine. Let me tell you, even if that's the case, I won't carve that for you. I won't ever." She was so angry that she wanted to say a few more harsh words. However, she inadvertently saw where she was originally standing. Her eyes widened. She was standing on a hard and uneven crystal slope. At this moment, there was a swamp in the crystal slope. All the large rocks in the surroundings seemed to be attracted and slid into the swamp. There wasn't even a sound as they were swallowed by the fiery red swamp. The large rock she was sitting on had long disappeared. It must have been swallowed by the swamp. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.